Hello and welcome to the BNB show. My name is Brandon Kane, of course, and this man to my left, my cohort, is Seahawks Brendan Nelson. So we're coming at you at this somewhat of a different special time here for these BNB shows, trying to try this out a little bit. But Brendan, I got you in the house after 3 straight losses, which is never good. How are you holding up over there?
I'm holding up okay. It's not where I wanted to be, but it's where you always kind of knew it was possible you would be. So I'm going to go with the flow for a little bit here and see what happens next time.
Just got to let the season kind of play out a bit and just see how it will all fully come to bloom a little bit by the end of things. And we do have a lot to talk about today with the Atlanta Falcon matchup, 10 a.m. on the road. Seahawks made a trade here over the past couple of days. The Jamal Adams gets released from the Titans, so there's some people wondering about whether or not he could come back and make a return to Seattle. But before we get to any of that stuff, Brendan, let's jump right on into this last game as much as we possibly can stomach, because I don't know about you, but I just, the thought of the, every time I think of, it's just every time something just starts to bubble up in the back of my throat. I don't know what it is about that Niner game, but I suppose let's start big picture as we like to do on this one. From a major standpoint, major takeaway standpoint, what do you walk away with off the back of this Niner game?
Well, I don't think that anybody is going to claim that the reason why we looked past the Giants game anymore was because we were focused on the Niners. I don't think you can say that anymore.
Yeah, I would agree. And let's also say this. This team's not earned any right now or the last 3 years to be in any position to overlook anybody. They're not good enough. Brass tacks. They need to play everybody legit.
That's right. That's right. And look, I got a little bit of sympathy. I know 3 games in 10 days is tough. That's bad news. And fortunately, we won't have to deal with that again the rest of this season. Hopefully, we never have to deal with it again. But yeah, I mean, you're kind of using that game as a litmus test, number one, to see how you square up against one of your most heated division rivals, the team that has won the division 2 years in a row now. But you're also using it as a litmus test to see how this new regime handles adversity. So on both counts, you'd probably say not good. And of course, I'm going to give them a chance to get back up. I'm going to give them a chance to bounce back from this and show down the line that they can handle these situations better. But if you're using this as like the first test of what Mike Macdonald does when there's adversity, you'd have to say it's not good. I mean, I think I could count the number of players that actually played well on Thursday last week on one hand.
It's very true, and maybe not one of those, or maybe just only one of those on the defensive side of the ball at that, and how they played. So same place I'm coming from with this, where I just think it has you rechecking your expectations a little bit from this team. Not that they don't still have a chance to go make some noise this year, but it definitely kind of is a sobering sort of game in this way, and how you got beaten. Again, the Niners have now done this to us a couple of times over the past couple of years. When we start out with the defense, Brendan, to my eyes, I know that there's some more changes of coverages to the Seahawks defense than we've implemented in the past. That's definitely a notable change. But I don't know if I saw as much of stack boxes, simulated fronts, a willingness to pressure when you're a little bit light manned there on that defensive line, or guys that are dealing with injuries. Did your eyes see the same thing when it came to this defense in this game?
Yeah, there was like 1 3rd down where I think we sent Rayshon on a blitz, and it actually kind of worked. It disrupted Purdy to the point where he had to throw the ball away.
Yeah.
Other than that, it was pretty vanilla. I was surprised at how, and by the end of the game, I understand. Okay, people got hurt. We had a bunch of backups out there. They're probably not equipped to do the things that McDonald might want to do. But it was early in that game. We still saw rush four, soft zone, soft zone, soft zone. And that did kind of surprise me because McDonald has the formula here. He single-handedly ended Brock Purdy's MVP campaign last year with that Christmas game, basically pulling his pants down. And we saw none of that. We saw none of that in this game outside of maybe 1 or 2 instances. And the only thing from the defense that I saw that I liked really was I felt like we were in 3-man fronts more often. I felt like we actually did bring that third guy on a little bit more. And I think that was an adaptation from that Giants game where we tried to get by with 2-man fronts and it didn't work. Now, the 3-man fronts in this game didn't work either. But at least I can look at that and go, well, at least they adapted. At least they tried something different even if it didn't end up working out. But yeah, I would say that we're still waiting for the Mike McDonald defense that we thought we were getting when the season started. Like the coverage mix-ups are nice, because my understanding is from all the data I've seen, this team is still doing a great job not living in any one coverage scheme the whole game. They're cover one, they're doing cover three, they're doing cover two man, they're doing all different kinds of things. That's great. That's new. But I think our blitz rate and the kinds of blitzes that we're running are pretty in line with the average point of the league. And I'm a little bit surprised that we would still be there after 6 games.
I am too. You talk about adjustments. It's the adjustment I'm kind of looking for with McDonald here. And, if you're going to get beaten and you're going to lose 3 games in a row, and if defensively you're going to have it taken to you, Brendan, in every way, I know we've talked about this before, but just one more time, I want to put it to the play table. If you're going to lose this way anyway, walking into it, we're going against a Falcon team this week that's got very capable offense. At least go down swinging to me. At least go down doing what you have. It's understandable to me with a Coach Carroll when he goes, look, I've got a front four. I don't have blitzing built really within my defense. That's not within the DNA of my defense. So when a Coach Carroll doesn't want to bring stack fronts or blitzes, it's understandable because that's not how his defense is structured or put together. But it is within this here to be able to do this. And I just don't quite yet have seen really with McDonald and how he's calling games and how he's putting these strategies together against these offenses where you're feeling that effect of him, where you're feeling that benefit really of him and what he brings to the table. It's early. It's got to have some time to onboard this. I'm not saying that I'm drawing some conclusions on him, but it has been a little bit disappointing to see them not even really be trying to get a little bit wild with it here as you are dealing with injuries, as you are undermanned. That'd be to me the logical step to sort of get around this a little bit, or at least try to get around this a little bit.
Yeah, you still had a few days to prepare for this game. I know it's a short week. I know it's a quick turnaround, but you've still got time to prep for this game. So the fact that they came out with none of that stuff was really disappointing to me. Again, by the end of that game, okay, I get it. Trey Brown gets hurt. Artie Burns gets hurt. You're undermanned back there. I understand maybe wanting to play it safe at that point, but early in that game, it wasn't any different. So that's the thing that I'm kind of hung up on a little bit here. And I'm not going to say disturbed by. I don't think we're at that point yet, but I am wondering if you got a chance to ask McDonald in private why we're doing things the way we're doing things. I'd wonder what he would say, and I'm not sure what he would say.
If you had to guess, is this a defense that's right now underperforming? I mean, back to almost the square one they were last year because of the fact they don't have the talent to do this, or because that he's not been able to fully onboard his scheme as of yet?
I don't think this team lacks talent to the point where it's okay for them to be as bad as they've been over the last few weeks. They have enough talent to at least be okay. They have enough talent to be decent. And over the last 3 weeks, they have been the worst. Over the 6 weeks we've had so far, by the way, they literally ranked 25th in points allowed, which is identical to what they were last year and the year before.
There you go.
So I don't think the lack of talent justifies that. I do think they have some players that are, fairly talented who are not playing well. Like in this game, I felt again, the linebackers in particular, just constantly filling the wrong gaps in the wrong place. Baker and Dodson. And Baker, I'm not terribly surprised by because he is coming off a major injury. I can understand that zaps some of your effectiveness as a player. I'm really surprised at how bad Dodson has been with his run fits over the last couple of weeks. I did not see that coming.
Yeah. No, they've it's been tough watching the linebacker play right now, and I know, but with Bobby, I know you're going to get dinged as far as pass coverage goes with him, Brendan. But at least with Bobby, you knew he would be there solid as a run defender, and he would fill those right holes and fight the right lanes. I mean, there's an argument to be made on this that you're not getting a lot bad from these two guys and making that move like you did. I understand they were moved at the time to try to get guys that quote unquote fit the scheme better, but I don't feel their coverage skills really in what they're bringing on that as though that they're somehow being so great in their drops and coverages or whatnot that's making up for it. It really isn't. And both guys look like right now they are going to be 1 year stopgaps if it continues like this.
Yeah, and they probably always were. I didn't think we were going to have money to bring him back anyway. And I did kind of get the sense on some of these signings that because we didn't have a lot of money, we were just like, okay, let's go get somebody.
Yeah.
Right. I really felt that with a guy like Rayshawn. It was just like, okay, go get somebody who can kind of sort of work for a year because we had to cut bait with so many expensive safeties last year. Yeah, I'm just really surprised at how I'm surprised at how bad they look. The thing is, I don't think those guys are so untalented that it justifies how poorly they played the last couple of weeks. They're not great players, maybe, especially Baker at this point in his career.
Yeah.
I don't think it justifies how poor they've been.
Yeah, it shouldn't be this bad where again, it's a defense. This game, like we saw in the past too, Brendan, there's nothing you're doing well. You're not tackling well. You're not stopping the run. You're not rushing the passer. You're not coveraging particularly well. You're not creating anything close to a turnover. I mean, you're not coming close to sniffing a turnover the past couple of weeks defensively, which is absolutely a warning sign that there's some problems at play here. But not any real good to turn over with this defense. Not anybody. I think Witherspoon was the one sole guy on that defense that I'd give a tip the cap to. Gave up 3 yards in coverage, and I thought that he was a willing defender. Where sometimes there's some defenders on this team, Brendan, where I'm not always sure about their willingness to come up there and really try to make the tackle. Well, I think there's still guys on this defense at times that look for others to go make that play rather than them going and making that play, and that's why you don't see as much rallying to the ball and as much convergence on ball carriers in general.
I thought Leonard Williams looked better this week. That would be the other guy maybe I call out. But yeah, I can't think of too much else. Both the edge rushers didn't look that good to me. Now they're both probably hurt. They're both probably playing through stuff, especially Mafe, who only played like a third of that game. He was probably really gutting through it. But yeah, there's not too much else that can be said.
No, there's not. So let's move over to the offense. And I know you and I are of a like mind of this to the degree, but I do want to touch this off the top and make sure that we're pointing at where the big problems lie right now with this team. And offensively, when we're looking at that, what's on offense is the problem. And I sense that there is, in my opinion, right now amongst the fan base, way too much obsession at times placed upon Geno Smith and DK Metcalf in this offense. And that, that it becomes really them as sort of they end up being the sort of the catch-all, the whipping boy a little bit. And not that they haven't given moments for that, and especially in this game, for them to become that for people. But to me, Brendan, I don't see as many people really, not as many. I see it there's a good chunk of the fan base to me kind of concentrating on the wrong thing here. And my eyes go to somewhere else more specifically on this offense is the main problem. Where do you stand as far as when you look at this offense and the struggles they've had here? And it's not been as bad as the defense, but just where the struggles do you kind of lock in on the cause?
Yeah, I think there are a couple things going on with the offense that really catch my attention. To be clear, first of all, I know there were some people buzzing about this, but I don't have any problem with the pass run split this last week. I think that we were forced into it. I think we tried to run the ball early. It didn't work at all for a myriad of reasons. And then you're down 23-3 right after half. You got to throw the ball a lot. So this is not going to be a situation where I'm harping on that. I know some people kind of were, but to me, that was just kind of what you have to do in that circumstance. Obviously, you have just the raw play of the offensive line, which is, I still think, the biggest problem here. I mean, Nick Bosa had 14 pressures in one game here. Some teams don't get that from their whole team in a game.
Right.
A guy, most players would consider 14 pressures to be a pretty good month. I think that beyond just the offensive line, one thing that I've noticed with this team that I think is another big problem is they cannot run out of 11 personnel. And they've kind of gotten to the point where they don't even bother trying. Every time they run the ball, they're almost always in 12. And I feel like defenses are catching on to that. I made a video about this last week, talking about this to as much as I could. When Tyler Lockett's on the field, this team doesn't really run the ball at all. And when they do, the little bit they do, they're not effective at all.
Yeah.
They only run the ball when Bobo, Pharaoh Brown, or AJ Barner, or some combination of those three guys are on the field. And I think that is creating a situation where defenses kind of know what to expect, because if you're that transparent to where we notice it, of course the other team is noticing it. So part of the problem is that none of our receivers or starting tight ends have been good run blocking so far this year. Lockett's been a disaster. Metcalf has actually been a disaster too. He's the one guy who can do it, but so far he's just been getting penalties left and right. And JSN, of course, is not a good run blocker, and Fant is not a good run blocker. So I understand that they want to steer away from that. But that's one thing that really stands out to me. I feel like you're kind of giving the game away before you even line up, just based on who's in the huddle. When our run percentage is close to 50% when Bobo, Brown, or Barner is on the field. So it's like 15% with Lockett on the field.
Yeah, it's a great point. And I think that when you come back to the running game, and something that stand out to me in the running game, to your point on this, Brendan, is that it really was notable in this game to me that the Niners were aware when we were running it and where we were running it, to the point that you'd have an outside corner crash all the way down into the A gap to take a power run off the A gap, and he makes the tackle right at the line of scrimmage because he's screaming down there with such confidence that he knows it's not going to be a pass play. And I think with Lockett and JSN in particular, you have two guys that just are not good blockers, period. Like you say with DK, you get that fluctuation there. Then you throw Fant into it. And man, you can start to see now where we don't get any push in the A and the B gap runs, the power runs. And if we want to get to the edges, it's those very guys who have to lay their blocks correctly for those plays to execute correctly, to get a sweep and to get an outside run play. Those guys got to lay down their blocks right. And you're right about it where they're just not. You can see it in the way they block. They do not hold up almost at all in Lockett and JSN as run blockers. And it is part of what's, holding back that running game. That's for sure.
Yeah, it does make me wonder, because Barner's been a pretty good all-around player so far this year. He's caught some passes, made some plays in the passing game. Do you just kind of shelve Fant a little bit, have Barner be your primary tight end, and just say, we're going to get to a point now where Barner being on the field could be one thing or the other. It could be a run, could be a pass. He'll be able to be adept at both. And that's what you need in order to create some kind of pre-snap balance.
Well, I'll say this. I think that the receivers have been good this year with Lockett, JSN, and DK overall, but have they been dominant? Have they earned the right for you to lean on this as an offense in 3 wide receiver sets? And to, outside of you saying, well, we've put this investment into the position, we're spending this much money into the position, we have the first round pick of JSN into the position. Outside of removing that stuff outside of it and just saying, what are you most really effective at and what you're doing, especially when you bring into the point you just talked about on the predictability of being, whether you're in, the 3 wide receiver sets or whether you're in 2 tight ends. I come back to it and I go, well, look, you've got to, at least with the 2 tight ends, you can keep them balanced and off balance on whether you're throwing or passing. And maybe you're not, as lethal down the field, but right now you don't really have the pass protection to be as lethal down the field. Where I think that's a lot of the problems coming out of this game too, Brendan, where why you have DK yelling on the sideline, can we please throw it past the sticks, and Grubb going, look, I can't throw it past the sticks because we don't have the pass protection to throw it past the sticks. I got to have that to hold up to get that to you on that side of it. And so we come back around to, I think that would be a pretty good adjustment to be made here, because the 3 wide receiver sets aren't carrying the day as much as you'd hope. I'm sorry, JSN's been a fine player, but he's not a difference maker out there. And Lockett's good for a couple of catches a game and what he does, and he's still been a very effective player, but he's not a difference maker out there. And with DK, we got the ups and downs stuff going on. So I think would be kind of smart to pivot this way, Brendan, in my opinion. Would you go that same route?
I don't know if you have a choice. I think you got to do it just so you can establish some unpredictability. Some people call it like conflict, the ability to be in 11 and still run the ball, or be in 12 and still throw the ball. Yeah. And there's not a lot of conflict in this offense right now. I would be the way some people put it. I've seen a lot of people on X refer to it that way. I don't know what else you can do, because Fant's not going to learn how to run block. Fant is what he is at this point. And the irony is Fant actually was maybe our best player on offense on Thursday. He actually caught every pass thrown his way and was fairly productive, but it's not going to work until maybe we can get Abe Lucas back, and maybe the offensive line settles in a little bit. Maybe his presence playing at a above average level on the right side helps Bradford, helps Williams, helps Tomlinson a little bit. It's like a trickle down. But for the moment, I do wonder if maybe the play is just let Barner play. He can kind of play both roles.
I'm not against it. And back to the 2 tight ends too is a quick way to have them both on the field on that at the same point. But I think, like you said, this isn't changing with these guys that aren't good run blockers. It's not going to improve. Fant's not getting better. Lockett's not getting better. JSN's not getting better. DK can clean up some of the penalties. So that part can improve a little bit. But the other things are going to be where they're at. And so, I think you got to just kind of work around this a little bit. And there's no doubting once Lucas gets back, the way Forsythe has struggled in, and he's just gotten worse and worse and worse. And I mean, the amount of pressures he's given up versus the number 2 guy on that list in the NFL is he's the worst in the NFL giving up pressures off that edge. Aiden Hutchinson had one of those days a couple weeks ago, like Bosa kind of had in this game. And so you will definitely benefit from that, I think, in a major way if Lucas can come back. It's the big if at this point, and how good he will be if he does come back. Maybe they'll activate him and come to find that he's still 85% of, his former self, and that the knee will never be kind of at 100%. But the team needs to probably make an adjustment here on this. And the predictability side, where we get to the heart of this, you got to be more unpredictable. You got to be more about keeping these defenses unsure prior to the snap about what you're doing, because I see a lot of certainty prior to the snap about what the team's doing offensively.
Right. It reminds me, it's different, but it reminds me of a few years ago when people noticed that Jermaine Ifedi would line up differently on pass plays versus run plays. And it was very obvious too. It wasn't like a hard thing to notice at all. It's kind of like a different version of that. And, I want to be clear here. The main tell with this offense is that we're behind a lot the last few weeks. So of course we have to throw the ball a lot. I'm not talking about that. Like the overall percentages for this offense, pass versus run, is very, very high. But what I'm saying is that when Lockett's on the field, the run percentage goes to basically nothing. And then it goes up to about 50% when you've got a guy like Bobo or Barner or Brown on the field. And, maybe that's part of the solution too. I mean, I'm not saying Lockett's playing poorly right now. Maybe you have to give more of his snaps to Bobo, not because you need to throw the ball to Bobo more, but because you need him out there as a run blocker. Maybe that's part of allowing this to have some balance. Maybe you just need to say, hey, Lockett, it's your last year anyway. You're battling through injuries pretty much every week. You still do a pretty good job getting open, but you make this offense a little too one-dimensional.
Yeah, and it's holding us back in a major way. It's because teams are taking advantage of that one-dimensional to the utmost. So I think that there's a strong argument to be made there. There's certainly a lot of fan base clamoring for more Bobo, and has been for a while. So I don't think it's the worst of places to go here, even with Lockett being effective, because, again, like you just said, Lockett's not really going to be here as long-term another year after this. This is his last year kind of no matter what. So use him as you need to use him to make the offense most effective. That should be really the bottom line, not how to get him more touches and more, stuff like that.
Yeah, and again, with Bobo, it's not even about touches. It's just about I need his run blocking. And he's a great run blocker. He's the night and day difference between him and everyone else on this team.
That's for sure. That is for sure. And he's a good pass catcher too. He still, this year, has been pretty good when you have given those moments to get out there, still run routes and, make plays. So he's still able to bring that too, as far as that goes. Sloby1, thank you for the $10 donation, Sloby. Says, did you see they are bringing in the real grass for the World Cup? With all these ankle and knee injuries, it would be nice if Jody just brought in grass for all sports.
People have been talking about this a little bit lately. I have noticed the grass versus turf argument.
Yeah, it's one where the data on this for a 15-year data stretch is pretty succinct in showing you that I think it's something like 35 to 40% more ACL, Achilles type injuries that you get on the turf versus grass. So, I mean, the data on it is pretty succinct. It spells it to one way, which is that it's better for the players. It's better for the health of the players if you have grass. The reason the owners have artificial turf is because it's cheaper to maintain. It's really straightforward as this. So from a fan's perspective, we want our players to be healthier. You'd think they'd want a better product because the more healthier players they have, the better product you have on the field. But the NFL just kind of sometimes becomes cheapskates about this Sloby one. So we'll see if they really will keep this going into the future after the World Cup comes through.
Yeah, that should not be a valid reason for doing something for Jody Allen, who is still like top 4, top 3 wealthiest owner in the NFL. That's something for like the Davises, right? The Raiders, like they're hard up. I would understand if they were like, look, we just can't afford real grass. That's actually valid for them. Yeah. A couple other teams as well probably just can't afford it, but this is not one of those teams.
Agreed. There's really no reason they shouldn't be doing it, Sloby one. So we'll see if there's a push if they can keep it thereafter. You never know on that. I think they're planning on still returning the old afterwards, but you never know on that. Thank you for the $10 donation. Another $2 donation as well. It says, did you see DK take accountability for drifting? And that was at his press conference yesterday. Yeah. I did see that. Good up DK. I thought it was a good press conference on his part with a lot of people to question. I guess this is as good a time as any, Brendan, to touch on the DK stuff from this game. Another just polarizing figure in the Seahawks fan base. But it was good to see that, yeah, he did take the accountability on that for being able to do more. I still do maintain there that Gino's got to be a bit careful in making that throw because the corner was driving before DK made any soft drift or anything. The corner was driving on the route, and the throw still would have been on top of him. But it was a great press conference from DK. I do get very much just one of the more disappointing things I get from the fan base and having to have discussions on this for me, Brendan, is the DK stuff. I just, my bottom line in this, not to get too far down to it, because I really can't get too far down on this because I've talked this thing 80 miles from Sunday. I see him as part of the solution here, Brendan. I don't see him as part of the problem. Is it perfect? No, it's not perfect. Could there be things that he can clean up and get better at? Yes. But is he part of the problem? No. And the things that we've talked about already at the top of the show are much bigger, cancerous things coming off the body of this team right now than anything close to what DK is bringing as far as a negative goes. But what is your take?
So Pro Football Focus has a new stat that they're premiering, I believe, this year, called separation percentage, which is basically how often each receiver or tight end gets open as a percentage on plays where the defense is actually trying to stop them from getting open. So if it's 3rd and 25 and the defense lets the receiver get open like 10 yards down the field, that doesn't count because they're just dropping back trying to stop the 3rd down. So on plays where the receiver is actually trying to be stopped from getting open, how often do they get open? They've got like 107 players on the list. JSN is actually still pretty close to the top. Lockett is still above average. Do you think either of those things happen if DK Metcalf's not on the field? Like, there's no way, right?
No, as he's pulling a lot of the double and triple teams away, giving him more space to work with, especially those guys are sit down and zone kind of guys to a degree, is more than they are one-on-one man beaters.
Yeah. JSN is not scaring anybody with his 4.56 speed and that's on the Ohio State track. It's probably more like 4.6 if we're being honest. And Tyler Lockett at this point is probably about the same in terms of his ability to run in a straight line. And that is something that happens on every single passing play in a game. Every time DK's on the field, he's having this Steph Curry-like effect on the defense. And that is something that is never going to be captured by receiving yards or receptions or touchdowns or anything like that. And I just think Seahawks fans need to make their peace with the fact that you take away Metcalf, you're taking away all of that. And that is worth way more than what a fumble or a drop takes away. Especially when, the fumbles to me are especially ridiculous because he fumbles like twice a year. And that makes him the league leader over the last several years for a wide receiver. We're talking about something that happens twice a year. He's not fumbling every week.
That's
so right. I look at that and I say, people need to understand this stuff. Like I got a comment on one of my videos yesterday saying like, I think we need to trade DK Metcalf and build the offense around JSN and Jake Bobo. And it's like, Jake Bobo is running a 5-second 40. He's probably a little bit faster than that, but not much. You're not striking any fear in these opposing defenses with Bobo as your X receiver. Like, if you do that, I guarantee you JSN is going to stop getting open. Lockett's going to stop getting open. Nobody's going to get open. Because, by the way, even with Metcalf on the field, Fant is actually right near the bottom in terms of separation percentage, which, that's a bad job by him, I guess. But
he was known for coming out of Denver. So it's definitely something that's flipped on its ear from what he was at Denver.
Right. But, I made that video about JSN getting open a lot yesterday. And I think a lot of people took the wrong lesson from it because a lot of people said, okay, I think we should trade Metcalf now because JSN's getting open a lot. No, DK being there is why JSN gets open so much.
Yeah. And again,
so I'm not trying to change anything about that.
Yeah, and JSN's also a slot guy too. I mean, we talk about maybe Bobo could do some X stuff. Maybe I'd still be a little bit hesitant without the lack of speed. I mean, they're both basically slot guys. And if you're getting rid of DK, now you got to go get that outside guy. And these people just kind of go, well, just go get a 1st-round pick. And there's always receivers coming out every year. And so we'll just go get a 1st-round pick and we'll just make that the receiver and we'll flip it for DK and then we don't miss a beat. And I just think that that's a real narrow way of looking at this and that it never really tends to work out that way when you write it down on paper like that. You're not going to get the value back for DK because somebody who has to trade for DK is going to have to sign him to a monster contract. So you're not going to get the draft capital back you think you're probably getting at that point. I just don't see where there's any intelligence in it. This guy's helping us win football games. He's off to the best start of his career. He's the best Seahawks receiver through 5 years, 6 years of anybody in Seahawks receiving history. And we've had great receivers here, Brendan, who've had great starts to their career, from Largent to Galloway to Baldwin and Lockett. I mean, it's a stacked group. I continue to come back, just not quite understanding how this fan base, some of the fan base has got this slight push to want to get this guy out the door when he is such a good player. It's a very oddity to me. I've been watching football for years. I've never seen a fan base push and want to push a really great player out the door. I really haven't. It just kind of blows me away. And I maintain if we do this, we will regret it. You sent him to another team this offseason, you would regret it. You'd have, and all those people that are banging this drum right now, Brendan, would grow so silent. You watch them, they just get utterly quiet. And then that's why I'm being as loud as I am about this now, is because I just don't want to see it happen. And I think it's really silly.
Yeah. I've gotten to the point where the trade DK stuff is something that I don't take seriously. I don't think there's any intelligence behind it. Like, not only is he off to the greatest start for any receiver in Seahawks history, he's off to one of the best starts for any receiver in NFL history.
That's right.
If he's not meeting your standard, then, and I never say this almost ever about anything, but your standard is just way too high. You're thinking that every receiver that comes into the league is just playing like Calvin Johnson right off the bat. That's not the case. Believe me.
Yeah.
He is, and again, you know, stats are never going to justify what DK Metcalf really does out there. Like, the stats are good, by the way. And by the way, while we're here, let's also say he is 4th in the league in receiving yards. He would be 3rd if Ken Walker stopped shuffling his feet on the touchdown late against the Niners. He would be 1st if Geno didn't underthrow him on that go route in the first half. If those 2 plays cash in for touchdowns like they should have, he is 1st in the league in receiving yards. So, you know, think about that, and then think about how silly you sound when you're trying to get this guy out of here like he's the problem.
Amen. I can't any more on that. That's exactly where my stance is on it too, because I know those 2 catches are parts that people aren't thinking about in this game that had nothing to do with him. Where everyone's like, he should have stopped, and then he should have stopped going full speed this way, stopped, turned back around, jumped up and high pointed the ball because he had time to do that. Or maybe just Geno throws the 9 route how you're supposed to throw the F and 9 route. You know, where Geno does get hit, but Geno waits a beat there, Brendan. You know, where he actually waited an extra beat to make sure DK cleared through rather than throwing with anticipation on that throw down the field. And that's why it was a beat late. That's why he got hit on the throw. But I agree with you on that 150%. And that it's would change people's outlook considerably, those 2 plays, if they had gone the different direction on this one. If that's the case, then maybe the criticism should quiet down a bit.
Yeah. This is, and I am worried. I don't know how much general managers or owners or whatever listen to the fan base, but I do believe that the buzz from the fan base about not liking this guy could swing the pendulum the other way and make them feel like, well, it's okay that we can do this because the fans don't like him anyway. And I'm going to be I'm going to be taking it out on those guys a little bit on this channel. Believe me.
If it happens.
If he gets traded, then, you know, I'm going to let these people know that I think you guys were a little bit of the reason why this was allowed to happen. And, you know, if he gets traded to a team like Kansas City or something, where, you know, he's going to make the All-Pro team like 6 times over the next decade, and he's going to win like 4 Super Bowls, you know, I'm not going to let these people hear the end of it.
I won't either. I'll be pretty toxic about it at that point in a big time way. And I'm not tending to be that way on this channel with my stuff. But like I said, I've never seen anything quite like this before in 4 decades of watching football. A fan base have a great player that there's a segment of the fan base looking to how they can pivot off of him as fast as they possibly can at times. I don't get it. You got Mike Salk this week put out what he does it about once every 3 months. Should we trade DK thing, you know? And I'm over that effing guy completely. Low RPMs going on up there in the bandwidth on that man, big time. And you see it with his bootlicking takes as far as Mariners go too. Just, I mean, the absolute worst of the worst when it comes to this kind of sports. Why sports radio is dying, quite frankly, folks. But this did come up again because of his dumb butt bringing it back up into play again. And we'll see how it goes. We'll see how it goes, man. But I'll be in that same place you will.
Yeah. It's, you know, and like even the attitude stuff is, I mean, he's really done a good job tamping down the like attitude penalties and the extracurricular penalties as well. So people got on him for that. He got better about that. And I don't think he's done anything as bad as what CeeDee Lamb's been doing so far this year on the Dallas sideline. And Dallas gave him $35 million a year, no problem. So, and I think they were right to do it. I think he deserves it. I think he is that good of a player. He's a better player than DK Metcalf, if we're being honest. But what he's doing on the sideline pretty much every week is worse than anything I've seen Metcalf do. So even that's gotten overblown. Like everything has gotten overblown here.
Overblown is the way to put it. It's gotten overblown. And let's face it, we've been watching receivers for 30 years be divas on the sideline, right? It's kind of just a thing with that position group for some reason. I saw Jerry Rice at one point freak out in the early 90s when he was in, middle of his, everything's going great. And he's still over there losing his mind in one game against Atlanta. So it's just kind of, you don't have to like it, but you have to kind of, I think, accept that there's a bit of the nature of that beast to those receivers. They've got to lean on everybody else for their production. DK is going into a year where he's trying to go get paid that big contract. You see a game like this, Brendan, that people don't do this math on, where it's, what is he saying in that headset? Can we please throw past the sticks? Can we please get the ball? And Grubby can't because you don't have the pass protection. But now from a guy like DPA's perspective, he's going, hey, I'm getting open. Quarterback can't get it to me because other things on this team are failing offensively that isn't allowing me to be at my best. It's not me not being allowed to be at my, it's other stuff. Now, I've got my parts I've messed up too. I'm not saying that DK walks on water here. He's got stuff that, I don't necessarily love about his game that can be cleaned up. But that's the part where I think the frustration comes from. And that means it's not as much from a toxic point of view. He's just thinks that, probably can do more to affect these games than he's able to do. And it's because of these outlying factors.
Yeah. And, to me, a lot of people just like to complain. To me, it's a lot of people like, I had a lot of people in my comments, 9 months ago complaining about Carroll nonstop. And I thought, that was reasonable. But some of these guys even took it a little further than I would. It was just constant complaining about Carroll. I hate Carroll, fire Carroll. We fire him, they don't even celebrate. They just start complaining about somebody else. So what that tells me is that if they do run DK out of town and then they draft another hyper talented receiver in the draft next year or whatever, they're just going to start complaining about him too. So, they're complaining about Geno Smith. They run Geno Smith out of town. We get another quarterback in here who I guarantee you will not be as good as Geno Smith, at least at first, especially if he's a rookie. They're going to complain about him too. So I don't think they're worth listening to. I don't think they got anything intelligent to say.
Agreed. CP LTSXX Shaw, thank you for the $2 donation. He says, need a change at right tackle, right guard. Have Olu start and move Williams.
I don't think Williams has ever played on the right side. He's been a left guard and he's been a center, so I wouldn't necessarily move him to the right side.
To Brendan's point on the CP, the one thing you'd worry about moving to the right side is, does he have the prerequisite power in there that you want to have from those right guards versus the left guards that are more of the dancing bear types versus the three techs? To Brendan's point as to why he's been more of a left guard when he has been making that slide over to that side. So it's something that I think the team's kind of down on Olu a little bit on this, CP. I mean, that's, I think, a big part of that Williams move was just an acknowledgement that Olu's not come forward like they thought. I think that if there was a great iteration of this offensive line or a better iteration of this offensive line for them to put forward, I think they would have trotted out this point because of just how bad it's been. But what's your take there, Brendan? Should we try this? Is this maybe the move to make instead?
I don't think so. I think that the team is just in a bad spot because their starting right tackle's hurt and their backup right tackle's hurt. So they have to put a guy who's not even a right tackle out there right now, and he's fighting. He's doing everything that he can. I'm not, again, I've had to make this abundantly clear a few times over the last couple weeks. I'm not hating on Stone Forsythe. He's doing what he can. It's just what he can do is very, very limited by his low talent level and being played out of position. And I think you just got to live with it for the time being. It sounds like Fant could come back in the next week or two. So maybe things will get a little bit better. But there was a point in time where it looked like Jalen Sundle had actually moved past Olu on the depth chart. I don't know if that's still the case.
Yeah, it might be.
But it's possible that Olu is just bad. And, that's always a possibility with these fifth round guys. Maybe he's just bad. Maybe he can't play. And Williams is honestly starting to play pretty well. I wouldn't be moving that guy around right now when he's finally starting to settle in a little bit.
He is getting, it's been incremental CP, but he has definitely gotten a bit, Williams in that center spot better every week on the ratings and the rankings and how he's looked. Hasn't given up hardly any pressures from the center position, I don't believe, as well. And if you do get Lucas back and Lucas can be his former self, if Connor can continue to get better by the end of the year, we could really be looking at this team with now, instead of having just 1/5 of the offensive line functional, now we got 3/5 of the offensive line in more of a plus state. And maybe back to Brendan's point earlier, that is able to help you then give the help that needs, or you can get by a little bit then with the guards being as bad as they kind of are. And even in Lincoln came off his best game this last week too. So maybe even with Lincoln, he's able to get us back just to get to a league average stage where you need to get with both these guard positions, right, Brendan? It's not even about getting him to dominance. Just with the rest of those parts getting better, if Lucas comes back, just get to a league average state, and we kind of have a hell of an offensive line at that point if they could.
Yeah, I mean, I know that PFF has been kind of pro Laken Tomlinson. They actually have him with pretty good grades. I don't see it. Like, there's that one play that sticks out in my head from this game of the screen pass on 3rd and 2 to Walker, where he's got 30 yards in front of him. He's got 3 offensive linemen right in front of him, and Laken Tomlinson's just waddling upfield at nothing while Fred Warner's blowing past Christian Haynes to make the tackle for no gain or 1 yard gain. That was something. It's just like, where are you going? You're not going to get 30 yards down the field and block a safety, dude. Ken Walker's going to run past you 10 times over before you get up there. How about you focus on what's in front of you and throw the block on the guy who's right there, who's going to blow up the play? You know, and I've seen all these plays where he's falling down. I'm seeing all these plays where I know we're asking him to do things that are not in his skill set, but I still look at Laken Tomlinson and I say, I don't know what I'm supposed to like about this.
Yeah, it's not been a great deal. He's just not been as bad as he was starting out. So I would say that it's not, at least, but it's still, there are those moments that are brutal with him. And I mean, hell, if there's a trade to be made, go make one for left guard right now. I don't think there'll be one you can find out there, Brendan, for trade deadline. But
yeah, you know, the famous quote that everyone's harping on right now with Schneider from this offseason was, he said he doesn't think guards are valued correctly right now, and he thinks they're overvalued. I agree with him at right guard. I think that's a fair point for right guard, because right guards are all over the place. But I think the opposite is true now for left guard. Left guard's becoming one of the most valuable and hard to find positions in the whole league. There are very few true left guards out there.
Yeah, it's a tough one. I think that he is right. I think, Brendan, there's a bit of it though too that comes down to, if they're overdrafted and they're overpaid, that may very well be the reality. But if your reality then is that that's what I believe, so now I'm not going to draft those guys or spend the money on those guys, you're limiting your ability to be able to improve that unit. And John has basically tied one hand behind his back on this, making this determination. I know you and I've talked about it, but there's 3 ways you can improve an offensive line, and John's only using one of those 3 methods really in order to get this line up to a functional state of things. And so I get where he's coming from, but you also got to kind of come to the point, Brendan, where you're kind of like, you know, you could also say this about receivers. You know, receivers are tremendously overpaid. You can say they shouldn't be getting paid this much with how many good ones there are out there, with how many come out through the first round every year. Why are they getting $35 million a year? I get a good new one every year. But that's not the case. The price is the price. So you can bitch and moan about it, but that's where the game's evolved to. And John's got to, I think, just make his peace this offseason with understanding that, because I'm going to be patient with John. I'm not going to be like some of the people are here if this year doesn't go great and saying, oh, he's now on this hot seat. But I'll tell you this, if we go through another offseason, Brendan, of not trying to make any trades, of not signing anybody in free agency, and just merely we're going to go draft some more guys and hope they develop, there will be some feet being held to the fire at that point, because this has been a broken methodology that hasn't worked now for 10 years.
Yeah, I mean, if you don't want to play that game, you got to be perfect in the draft. You got to hit every pick
and develop.
Yeah, you got to hit every pick and have them develop properly. And it's hard to do. It's hard to do. And I mean, I will say this, there was an attempt made this offseason. He drafted Christian Haynes. He signed Connor Williams. But you look at something like the Cowboys back in the early 10s, where, you know, Jerry Jones, I think for very obvious reasons, doesn't like drafting offensive linemen. He thinks it's boring. And he also can't market offensive linemen the way that he could market a receiver or running back or some other positions. But I think his sons sat him down in the 2010 offseason and were like, look, we need to start spending these picks on offensive linemen. I don't care if you can't market them. This is what we need right now. You're going to have to suck it up. And They spent like 4 straight first-round picks on offensive linemen, Tyron Smith. They overdrafted the hell out of Travis Frederick. People freaked out when they drafted him. He was a 3rd-round graded guy.
Yep.
And Zach Martin. And the famous story is that Jerry Jones wanted to draft Johnny Manziel, and his son had to rip the card out of his hand so they could draft Zach Martin instead. So, you know, that's just something where, like, you have to understand that, look, okay, we got to take a slightly different approach here. Maybe this is a team that needs to spend their next 2 or 3 first-round picks on offensive linemen just so they can get to a decent state of it.
I really think they are. I think even with this offseason and Williams, which Williams is a great signing and finding value and getting him there, but you were getting a guy again that it's this thing of the approach has been draft. And then if we're going to spend money, we're going to spend a very small amount of money, between $3 and $4 million on a 1-year contract. And it will be for an aging vet on his last legs or a guy coming off of injury, where you're on a wing and a prayer hoping this thing's going to work out, where you can see that if we're playing the odds here, that's not likely to work well. George Fant coming into this year, you can say there's probably a good chance that guy's going to get injured this year as that backup tackle to Lucas. And since Lucas isn't ready to go game 1, you're really putting this in a troubling sort of state already right out the gate and how you've aligned this up. And he's really only been, when you break that down, Brendan, it's been draft, and it's been signing aging vets to low-level contracts. And that means I'm not going to trade for quality. Dwayne Brown was the only guy you did on that back in 2017. So you can't tell me that that's a philosophy of this team, especially since I don't think there was another trade like that for an offensive lineman prior to the Dwayne Brown trade. So you won't make a trade, and you won't sign big money deals. So it's, to me, this is really where we can see how it's easy why this line has gotten to the state it is that you have 3 pathways to improvement. You're only using one of those pathways. Yeah, that's going to fail. When other NFL teams are using the other 3/3 of that way to get that done. But your point on this is also right. If you're not going to spend, then just put the investment in the line and dump those first few picks. I don't care. It needs to get better. This has been a problem it's 10 years, Brendan. 10 years as an issue. Not just a 1-year off, not just a 2-year, not a Carroll problem. It's been a 10-year issue.
Yeah, and don't get me wrong. I'd much prefer to do it in the draft because it's a lot cheaper and you can solve the problem for a decade.
Yeah.
Like, the Seahawks have put together a couple decent offensive lines over the last 10 years, but it's always like duct taped because it's built on the back of these aging veterans, right? Like, the 2018 offensive line was good. The 2020 offensive line was good, but they were built off of older players, right? Like guys like DJ Fluker, Brandon Shell having a career year, Dwayne Brown in his late stage of his career as well. It was always temporary. If you just used the big draft capital a couple drafts in a row on the offensive line, then maybe you could have this thing sewn up for the next 8 years. Because Cross, I don't love the game that he played on Thursday in particular, but overall, I think he's playing good football. Some people have gotten hung up on how many pressures he's allowed this year. That's because we throw the ball so much. You found something there. So there's a little bit of a foundation to build on. Just go do it. And maybe you won't have to think about it for a long time after that.
Very well said. Very well said. I agree. I think that's a good route. And to your point on the Cowboys again this year, 1st-round pick, right tackle Tyler Guyton, 2nd-round pick, come back and take Cooper Beebe. Yeah. So they still are continuing that strategy from 10 years, saying this has worked well, right? Like it's not like they're coming back and saying it failed, that whole thing that you talked about 10 years ago. It's them going, hey, this has continued to work really well for us.
Yeah, they built a great offensive line for a while there. It just didn't result in them winning the Super Bowl. That doesn't mean it didn't work.
That's right. That was more conceptually their problems with going other places, right, Brendan? Like that's them paying Jalen Smith and the Boise State kid. Remember after they had like one good year at the linebacker position, they gave them all the money, which is like, what do you that moment you as Jerry, you're like, what are you doing there, Jerry? So it's their problems have gone in other places and other problems, that they've gone down into that has nothing to do with that offensive line. God's Gang, thank you for the $5 donation. What's our cap look like at the moment? And could Seattle look at bringing in someone at the edge position or the offensive line, or are we content? Currently, we are at, let me see here. Let me see. We are at $10 million. I don't know if they've got the new deal on there from the Roy guy yet. So we're about, no, it's in there. Okay, so we're at $10 million about right now in cap space.
Remember, any trade you make might cost you the ability to extend somebody next year, though, because that money's going to roll over. And I think the plan is let's let some of that money roll over so we can take care of Cross or Mafe. or Metcalf or Geno or Woolen or whoever. So understand that just because you have 10 million in space doesn't mean that 10 million exists in a vacuum that can never help you in any other context.
It's very true. It's very true. And I think that that's the team, God's gang. I think to Brendan's point, that's where the team is leaning right now from a contextual standpoint of what they'd like to do with that money. If there's a deal that comes up that's ripe and looks good for them, will they jump on it? Sure. But I think that they're trying to hold that money off. And especially if the plan here is to hold on to Roy long term, it's the part some people weren't, and we'll talk about this deal in a second, Brendan. I don't want to talk about right quite now, but the people weren't considering about the Roy deal was that it is about a $6 million cost on the cap next year. You hurt your cap cost next year to bring him in. Now, can he be released at any time? Can he be traded anytime? Sure. But that is what it is as it's standing right now. And Schneider's got to take that into account a little bit. So I think it's going to be hard, God's gang. I think if the team had played better and was more consistent at this point, you could feel better about making a go for it kind of move. But because they're so up and down, and certainly in a down point right now that isn't looking great, it'd be hard for me if I'm John Schneider to make some go for it now move, especially if it is to put that future cap space in a bit of peril, like Brendan said.
Yeah, we're not the Jets. We don't have a 40-year-old quarterback that you've traded the farm for, and this is your last chance. Yeah. And you just have to start slamming down buttons until it works.
That's right.
We're not in that spot. We're not there. The offensive line guys you could trade for would mostly be guys that have just kind of failed, but have like draft pedigree. Like the Titans have, what was the North Dakota State guy they drafted a few years ago?
Dylan Radins.
Yeah. Like they played him at like 4 different positions every year and he sucked, but maybe you could stabilize him in Seattle with one position. You could probably get him. You could trade for like Evan Neal. I'm sure New York would take anything for him. Although Andrew Thomas is out for the season now. Maybe they're like, okay, let's see what Evan Neal can do at left side.
True.
But you're not going to get anybody good. You're going to get players that have talent that aren't actually playing well right now. And maybe there are excuses for it. Maybe there aren't. It's going to be, and by the way, if you could trade a super low pick for like a Dylan Radnuns and kick the tires on that, I wouldn't be against it. But you're not getting somebody that you're just going to feel great about plugging in there. You're going to get somebody that's like, man, I hope that they can do something.
Yeah.
But the good offensive linemen are not going anywhere because teams want to keep those guys.
They really do. They really do. They're as valued as any position group in this sport. Maybe edge would be the one spot, God's gang. There's a very outside chance they could take a look at there. Though Roy might, he's not really as much an edge, but that might have defunct that one a bit. But that would be the only position where I'd say that's one where there's a little bit more. Sometimes you can find a guy, Elder Rush just comes in from rotational snaps. So that's a possibility they find a guy there, especially if they're not really sure if Uchenna is going to be able to really come back by the end of the year or be at his typical self. So there may be that they push for, but I don't see any moves that stand out to me that make a lot of sense as we sit right now looking at it, God's gang.
What's Dwight Freeney up to?
Yeah, exactly. He's got a spin move left in the bag. Come on. He's got a couple spins left. Addis the Gamer, thank you for the $2 donation. He says trading DK Metcalf shouldn't be a discussion.
The only way I would do it is if he's asking for like 40 million a year on his next contract and he's not budging, and that's very unlikely to be the case. Like that would be really weird if he just suddenly decided I want to reset the market by $5 million.
Especially when the previous time he took a little bit of a discount. I'm not saying he took a major discount, but he took less than what you would have thought he would have taken on that average per year deal last time. And so I don't think he's of that mentality either. And I agree with the Addis. It really shouldn't be something that comes up anywhere near how much it comes up. And it disappoints me a little bit that so much of the fan base gets caught up on this so much. And I wish someone would just like let it go. Because you see these people, as I've said, it's like a dog with a bone. They will sit there and chew on this thing and ignore everything else. And this becomes the central thing to their whole viewpoint of the Seahawks team. And you can feel it in the discussions with them. And it's like, dude, there's other stuff on this team we can talk about. There's other things that are way bigger problems, way bigger fish to fry. But it has been one of those things that's kind of popped along there, Addis, unfortunately.
Yeah. I mean, I don't remember Seahawks fans complaining about how Cam Chancellor was mediocre in coverage. No, I don't remember that.
I don't remember people freaking out about Sherman when he lost his crap in the Atlanta sideline. Absolutely lost his stuff. I mean, this is a guy that at one point was reported as telling the quarterback, Russell Wilson, at practice, "You effing suck." And he's on the sideline literally losing his mind to the point that everyone has to gather around him to get his head back after he just blew his coverage. after he just blew his coverage, after he just made a poor play, not after somebody else did something, like he blew his coverage. And so, like, this is an emotional sport here. They're going to run high. These emotions going to get heated at times. That's the nature of the beast, in my opinion.
Yeah, you never have to worry about DK not trying. I mean,
right.
He'll make mistakes, but he's not. It's not a Randy Moss thing. What was the Randy Moss thing? I'll play when I feel like playing.
Yeah, if I don't think the ball's coming my way, I'll take the route off.
Yeah.
I'll hoof it a little bit. So yeah,
Yeah.
he's not that way. And certainly,
you don't have to worry about that.
No, you don't. Pyro Griffin, thank you for the $2 donation. He says, how do you think Tyrell Dotson has played so far?
It's been okay. Like I said, the run fits the last couple of weeks have been kind of a mess. And I also feel like Dodson and Baker are really exposing a big problem Pro Football Focus has with linebackers, because that's not getting captured at all these last couple of weeks. Like, both those guys have been disasters, and Pro Football Focus is just out of sight, out of mind on that completely, I think.
Yeah, I think that they are as well, because both those guys' grades the past few weeks of this defense has been putrid. Has been like, well, they're not the problem. If you were to look at the grades, you'd walk away with it from that, like they've held up their end of the bargain. But I'm with you, Brendan. The eye test on it, what you see from them on the field, is that they're not getting the job done, either in coverage or as a run defender. Dodson, I think he's like 27th rated by PFF, even with that good grade, essentially, Brendan, even with that kind of plus grade. So he's been, to me, Pyro, slightly underwhelming. He's not been bad. He's got some moments that he's shown some sparks and an all-around ability as a linebacker, but the consistency's not been there. And I think Brendan's points about the run fits, where you see him on all 22 tape at times, taking himself into a gap that's nowhere near where the run play is going. Not that he forces the gap at the point of attack and then the back bounces it out, but that he misreads the gap and then the running back's going here. And that's the part that has been a little bit underwhelming from him.
And maybe part of the problem is they're not practicing enough the last couple of weeks because of the quick turnarounds on these games. I know a lot of our practices have been walkthroughs. Maybe that's part of it. But I'm going to give it time to play out. But regardless of what happens from here on out, I don't think he's going to be here next year. So I'm not going to get too upset about it. I think he's a temporary solution. But honestly, I never thought I'd say this. I think Tyrese Knight has looked overall just as good as our two starters.
Agreed. He's at least been an impressive one that certainly gives you some confidence about maybe the long term with him there, either the Will or the Mike. Probably the Will long term with him.
Yeah.
Stale, thank you for the $5 donation. He says, what do you think if John Schneider managed to swing a trade for Josh Allen or Trayvon Walker? And I'm guessing he means Josh Allen, the hyphenated Jaguar defensive end is who he's meaning here, folks, not the Josh Allen Buffalo quarterback, for, say, a second-ish. Is there any player you have your eye on?
Well, Josh Allen just signed a $140 million contract. I don't think he's going anywhere. I think Jacksonville would it would almost be like a Deshaun Watson situation, where if they traded him, the dead cap hit would be such that they literally could not field a full team.
Yeah.
That's not happening. Trayvon Walker, little more interesting because he's still on the rookie deal and he's underachieved, but he's very talented. But I don't know what the point is of that. I still think I think that you got to aim a little bit lower here. I don't think we're going to trade for a big time edge or a theoretical big time edge like Walker when we're about to have to pay Mafe, and down the line it's also going to be Derek Hall. I think that you do kind of set your gaze at somebody like a Clowney for a 6th round pick or something like that. And I'm not really going to go too much higher than that. If you're going to go higher, I would almost try to hit the 600-foot home run and go after like a Max Crosby or something, but I don't think I really want to do that either. So no, not really.
Yeah, it just doesn't quite line up for me either here, Snail. You put a couple of 2nd round picks on your edge over the past couple of drafts. You've also allotted a 1st round pick in this last draft to defensive tackle, another 2nd round pick to another defensive tackle. I kind of feel like the defensive line's gotten its resources invested in, the proper resources invested into it, and now it's time for the returns to start going into it rather than us, really dumping significantly more into it. And so, that 2nd round pick to me has got to be more earmarked for obviously the best player available. I'm not saying we go for a need here, and it's just got to be a lineman or it's just got to be an inside linebacker. But I'm not really going to be jumping for another edge at this point. Go make a trade for Trayvon Walker. He ends up starting. Okay, now you got Derek Hall sitting on the bench. Do you want that with his ascent? No, you don't. So I just don't think there's really a spot that it works for the edge right now. I think Brendan's point about Clowney is the one I know I've gone to a lot, and Brendan's gone to a lot, but this is because it makes a lot of sense. He's got history with McDonald. He's not going to cost you a lot. He's on a short-term deal. The Panthers are likely to be in sell mode. And quite frankly, Clowney would give you pretty much, it would be different type of impact, but he would give you almost an equivalent impact to what a Trayvon Walker would, because he's such a fit to this defense and because he's so multifunctional in what he brings as far as a run defender and as a pass rusher. So I think that's really the value move to be made, whereas Walker costs you the second, and then you're going to have to turn around and have to sign him to a major contract on top of Mafe you're going to have to sign to, because I think isn't this his third year now?
Hold on one second here. He was in the same class as Hutchinson, so yeah.
Yeah, so his third year. So you're also having to give him that monster 25, 26 on top of having to spend Boye Mafe. So there's just no really way for it to make sense. And I agree with you on the same thing with Crosby. I think to me, the Niners should be on top of Crosby. You want to talk about what I think will be a move the Niner fans will look back on and say, we should have done that and we didn't do it, is not going all in for a Crosby right now. You'd have to give up a lot, but from the Niners perspective, so what? Leonard Floyd flopped out for Max Crosby and Bosa on either side. You're telling me they're not going to get the Super Bowl with those two rocking with how that team's playing? I'd do it all day if I was the Niners. First, third. I'm sorry.
Yeah, you had the theory that the Niners owner would kibosh any deal because he doesn't want to spend any more money. I wonder if that's true. Because if they don't make a big deal in the next couple of weeks, I'll assume that's the case, because there's no reason for them not to otherwise.
There really isn't. And this is you can make that argument. This is maybe potentially that final year of that window shutting. I know Brock's played better and all that, but boy, you're going to be reaching those decisions down the line there. And to me, it's if I look down immediately, I get Crosby in there and I get all of what I have as my collection for the go for it final year of the Super Bowl window. And then next year you just pivot off Kittle, you pivot off Debo. You've got Parasol and Juwan Jennings there to fill back in on the receiver front. And then you just put that money back over to Max, and slide it on over, and then you make your bones with it that way. But because then you're only on the base for Max, right? The bonus is off from the Raiders. So you only have the base of his deal over the next 2 years if you're the Niners at that point.
Yeah.
I'd be doing it all day. I don't know if there's other factors that could hold it up, but if I was the Niners, I would be going very aggressively at the Raiders with that one.
They suck at drafting anyway. Who cares about the picks?
That's what I'm saying. Like you released 2 third-round picks this training camp from just the last year, and you've got, your Ricky Parasol hasn't even played so far yet. So, what's for your guys' perspective, it's going to be a late first rounder at that. What do you care? For a draft, it's not looking like it's necessarily going to be super strong either.
Yeah.
Phoebe Moore Seahawks, thank you for the $2 donation. The 2021 Bengals had a top 10 defense and good run blocking.
Well, I mean, I guess I don't know what this is replying to. I'm not sure what this is responding to.
It could be in regards to pass protection and bad pass protection. And I think that that was one of the teams that I think I looked at when I was looking at teams that had really viciously bad pass protection, that like in Burrow, I was telling you about that, those guys that were in the back end on PFF's ranking on pass protection, but there was one quarterback other than Geno who's actually been able to perform well in that environment, being Burrow, maybe from that season. So what he's saying is that Burrow also then had a top 10 defense that year and good run blocking. To get that done. And that's a great point there, Feed Me. That's a great point. I was looking at it as well, Brendan, at the top 10 PFF quarterbacks right now. And Geno's obviously on there at number 9, and looking at their pass protection in alignment with that. And only one guy was worse, which was Derek Carr. We were at 27th. He's at 29th, but Derek Carr also got what? Injured.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And that game, obviously Geno Smith didn't play very well, but do you know how crazy it is that he got sacked one time in that game and it was in garbage time?
Yeah.
I mean, honestly, it's kind of crazy that whole game got played and there was one total sack by both defenses and it was in garbage time. Even when Geno Smith is at his worst, do you know how big of a wizard you have to be to not get sacked in that game when Bosa's getting into the backfield every other passing attempt?
Yeah.
Even when he's at his worst, I think most teams in the league would still be pretty happy to have him.
I do think as well. And I think that's the hard part for math for a lot of people to do at times, is the understanding of how hard it is. I mean, Brent and I was on the round table this last week, and these guys are still not doing the math on this. They won't do it. They refuse to do it. And your supporting cast affects how the quarterback plays. And if the supporting cast is in piss poor shape across the board, it's going to heavily affect your quarterback. And people don't want to do that math, but it doesn't mean it's not right. And the fact that Geno's performed as well as he has, inundated with pressure like he is on a weekly basis, inundated. And that's on top of not having good pass protection, on top of a defense regression. It makes the quarterback position so hard to play. You have to be so perfect all the time. And that should never be the expectation for the QB position.
Right.
Roy Frolic, thank you for the $5 donation. Appreciate you guys on all the donos today. Says, throwing darts with late round offensive line picks. How's that working out?
I mean, that was more of a problem years and years ago when you had the Drew Nowaks and Christian Sokolais and God, who am I forgetting? Who else was there?
Oh my gosh. Well, you've got
Obam Gwacham.
Obama, yeah, there's a Gwacham. I think he was an edge, Obama Gwacham. But I know
wait a minute. Yeah.
God, there's so many of them, and I can't remember right now. But there's about 15 million. There was the one guy we took that was a left tackle for a while before we traded for Dwayne Brown.
Sowell or something, Bradley Sowell or
something like that. They're doing it a little bit still, Roy, with how they've gone recent years. They've done more with the top of the draft than they had in prior years in succession. Top 10 pick to Cross, 3rd round pick to Lucas, 3rd round pick to Christian Haynes over a 3-year period. I don't think if I looked at John Schneider's 14-year run, if you had a 3-year period where he put up as many of those high picks over a 3-year succession. But to your point, Roy, more needs to be done because you were also 3 years ago taking this line from a place where there were 0 foundational pieces. So if your line's like kind of up to snuff and you make those picks, okay, we can do that balance. But when you're starting from a 0-hour spot like we were 3 years ago, more needs to be done. More needs to be done than just saying, okay, we'll make these picks in the early part and we'll make some of these picks in the late part, and the accumulation of that will be enough with some bargain basement free agents to get this into a functional state. It's not, it hasn't been, it won't in the future if they keep taking this approach. So as me and Brendan are advocating for here, Roy, and I'm not a guy that likes to say just draft this position because that leads you to need. But at the same point in time, this thing has been an issue for far too long. It's not been covered. It's not been taken care of. And the thing that drives me most crazy about NFL organizations is not those that make mistakes. It's those that continually make the same mistakes over and over again, refusing to learn.
Yeah. And, we know how this can look with a good offensive line. When we had a good offensive line for the first 10 weeks of 2022, Geno Smith was playing like a league MVP. That's not me making a joke or exaggerating. You look at the numbers over those first 10 games, or what was it, 10, 11 games, and you project them out. He was on pace to set the all-time record for completion percentage. He was on pace to have a really good touchdown interception ratio. He legitimately would have been in the MVP race. As it is, he got an MVP vote, even though he fell apart in the last 6 weeks of the season or so and wasn't playing nearly as well because Lucas got hurt and a couple other things happened up front. But we know how good the results can be. And that 2022 offensive line wasn't amazing. It wasn't elite. It was good. Things worked fairly well. Damian Lewis had probably his best season as a pro. I'm sorry, not Unger. Posick was playing pretty decent at center that year.
It wasn't Posick. It was Brown. No, it was not. It was the other guy. It was Austin Blythe to start that year.
Oh yeah, okay. Austin Blythe was playing okay. Like there were still problems, but it was decent and it was enough. Like, why wouldn't you want that back?
And it collapsed into the back. After that 10 games, it collapsed. That's a big part of the thing there too, is it just Lucas's health went down, you lost him. Blythe completely regressed, and those guys who did end up having good years overall, kind of it went backwards for them in a big way. And to your point on this thing with the Geno and how he played with that through that 10 games, this year, the highest rated quarterback in the NFL with a clean pocket, when given a clean pocket, the best quarterback in the NFL has been Geno Smith. But you've so often given him that clean pocket. So it's where, back to the point in time on this, back to looking long-term, back to whether or not Geno Smith could be a guy long-term. The answer is not about getting this quarterback in that quarterback. It's about fixing this base issue that's holding everything back a little bit, holding back the run game, holding back Geno, holding back the receivers. It's holding everything back on this team right now, and it's got to be addressed.
Right.
Thank you, Roy. Appreciate you for that. Holiest Hand Grenade, thank you for the $2 donation. He says, the fact that people are thinking of bringing Jamal back. And Brendan, give me just a sec here. I'll be right back. Give him some thoughts here, if you could, for me initially on your thoughts on Jamal and bringing him back here.
All right. Well, It's not hard to understand why people would at least be talking about this. Rayshon just went on injured reserve. We're having linebacker problems. So I understand it from those two perspectives, but two things need to be understood here. Number one, Jamal Adams has already said he doesn't want to play linebacker. So you're bringing him in, you're not going to be able to stick him there. And as a safety, Adams is a very one-dimensional player. He is a box safety. That's not really what Mike McDonald's defense wants. He wants safeties that can be versatile. I think that there might be players out there that could help alleviate this situation a little bit. Adams isn't really one of them. Now, if he was willing to do weak side linebacker stuff. Oh. Welcome back. Welcome back.
Thank you.
All right. So basically, all I said was that maybe if he was willing to play weak side linebacker, we already know he's not willing to do that. He's already said he doesn't want to be a linebacker. Like, if he was willing to do that, maybe I could talk myself into, well, maybe he can help with these run fits. And as a safety, he's just not a fit for this defense. McDonald wants safeties that can play in the box, that can play back. He wants versatile safeties that are kind of able to play both roles at any given time. Adams is not that anymore. So I don't know where this works. I understand why people are talking about it because Rayshon just went on IR and we've got some other injuries. Linebackers aren't playing that well. I don't think Adams is going to be the fix for any of that.
No, he's not. For the points you mentioned, and if you were going to get him in as a will linebacker, and even if he was willing to do that now, you probably needed training camp to work through the different type of packages that you'd want to bring him out there for. And it's too late in the game now to be trying to acclimate him into those kind of packages here. I think it's much more likely at this point that Jamal Adams is probably going to have to retire. The body just didn't hold up and broke down, and he got paid. Luckily, it didn't happen to him what happened to his father, but it sort of doesn't change that it is what it is there. I think if he was any good still as a player, that Tennessee would still be having him on that roster and using him out there. But I think it's indicative of the fact that his body just broke down on him.
Right. I can't get behind it.
No, I can't do it as well. War Chief, thank you for the $10 donation. War Chief says, aloha BNB. As a forester, I am high up in the mountains and deep in the forest of Hawaii with connection, so I can listen to my fave guys, Brennan Brand. Life's good. Please don't trade DK. He's our best player. Duh. Well, God, always love thought. He's out there in the middle of a Hawaiian forest on a small island in the middle of the Pacific. In the center of the island, there's nothing but forest everywhere he can see, but he can still get us. You got to love modern technology, don't you, Brendan?
Right. It's pretty nice.
Wonder if anybody's ever listened to us off on, like, in the Sahara or something. You know, they get some like Starlink connection with the Sahara. This picture out on a dune watching BNB.
Yeah, I used to write stories like fan fiction type stuff a lot. And on the website you would post them on, they would actually show you which country people were viewing your story from. It'd be always kind of interesting to see, like, oh, this guy from Trinidad and Tobago, or how do you pronounce it? You know what I'm talking about, right? That country.
Oh yeah, I can't pronounce it any better than you do. You know, I butcher that stuff too as well.
Yeah, and it's like, I wonder how they're reading my story. I wonder if they're putting it through like Babelfish Translate. I wonder how they're reading it, and it's just kind of cool that you're able to reach people all the way on the other side.
It is. It's an awesome part of this, and I'm sure you feel the same with it. You know, we got 12s all across the world on that side of it. So I mean, we're everywhere, quite literally, which is just football's kind of, you know, spreading across the world a little bit. People are starting to get that fever for it, which is understandable. It's a great sport. But thank you, War Chief. Don't be out there working too hard, man. I appreciate you. Thank you for the $10 dono.
Thank you.
Bronze Sausage with a $5 donation. No message put in there, Bronze, but just the $5 dono drop. I appreciate you for that. Very kind of you, man.
Thank you, Bronze.
Real Cheese. He says, if Gino walks, what is the comp we could get?
Well, he's not going to walk. He's got 1 year left on his contract, so that's not really a consideration right now. If you're talking about trading Geno Smith, that is really hard to answer. It's probably one of those situations where he's worth more to us than he's worth to other teams.
Yeah, I think that the comp part shot about Real Cheese is to can you get a team that will be willing to trade for him? And it's going to have to be a very special type of team who looks at their situation and believes themselves to be a contender. doesn't believe that they're in a position to go draft the quarterback, doesn't want to wait on the development of a young quarterback because they think right now they're ready to go. And how many of those teams are there out there in the sport? Maybe 3 or 4, Brendan, when we get to the offseason, that'll be in kind of that play, maybe 2 that are in kind of that offseason. And so that will not help you on the compensatory point. I think you're probably going to be lucky to get like a 3rd rounder back if you moved him in a trade. Maybe it could go to like a late 2nd round pick if that's to a team that's kind of a sub playoff team looking to get him on that side of it. But that'd be the max that I think you can get.
If Rodgers retires, could you get the Jets to triple down on this insanity and just keep going deeper and deeper and deeper into the hole?
Well, I mean, from their perspective, if he retires, what is their other options? They're not going to be in a position to draft a quarterback. They are kind of in a contend go for an amount. But I mean, the other part of that too, Brent, is they don't even have a head coach right now. So, I mean, they could also just as well be pivoting back to the take it to square one kind of thing with a new coach. The last thing didn't work. We got to hit the button on that one. So that would remove Geno completely.
I think we know that Belichick's not going to be on the menu there. I think we learned that pretty fervently on Monday.
Yeah, he does not like New York, man. He's got a bone to pick with them. Giants are a possibility too. Daniel Jones, that contract, and them not having anything that's really jumping out as something that could help them there. That might be a way they transition to go to like a Geno instead. But it's a little bit early to tell on that, Real Cheese. We have to see a little bit more on a couple of these other teams in the direction they're going to go, because you need that team in that little that exact pocket to be in play for Geno.
Yeah, and again, it's just a thing where he's worth more to you than worth to other teams. And in that situation, you probably don't want to trade the guy because you're not going to get good value and you're going to lose too much. And, I'm telling you right now, like any other quarterback you bring in here, unless it's like Josh Allen in that lottery winning scenario where Buffalo decides they want to move him, they're not going to be able to do anything behind this offensive line. Like the fact that Geno produces at all behind this offensive line is kind of a miracle. Pretty much any other quarterback you bring in is not going to be able to do anything behind this offensive line because it's that bad. And that's worth more than a 3rd round pick. I'm sorry. It just is.
Agreed. And that's where we come back to you and me both being in that camp of when it's all said and done, we're way more in pro and keeping Geno here because there's a pathway to this team competing by next year, contending by next year, but it's hard to see that path bear itself if you're trying to go with some rookie quarterback and roll it that way. That more looks like you're going to push yourself out a couple of years now in that process. And I don't know if you have to do that given the situation at hand.
Right.
Sages, thank you for the $10 donation. He says, Jade Barron from Texas could be a great day 2 pick for us Hawks. Plays all around the secondary and linebacker. We could get Mike his new Kyle Hamilton.
He is one of my favorites. I talk about him almost every week. I have had my eye on this guy. He's he's a linebacker / slot corner for Texas. He's all over the place for them, does a lot of different stuff. Really good, like 3rd down defender, I would say at minimum. I like him a lot. He's somebody I've had my eye on for a little while here since the year started.
I think I watched him a little bit last year. I'd have to go look at my notes on him. I think they played him a little more outside cornerish last year rather than in this spot. So, because I think I wasn't as much a ball of energy. You can tell. So my notes on him was it was a ball of energy. You could tell just sort of patterns his game after Jamal Adams. Plays with a similar kind of fire and aggression. 389 snaps out of the slot, 154 from the box. To your point, Brendan, that was last year. I do think they can't have him on. They had him on the outside at times on the film I watched last year with him. So he's got to stay to the slot. He'd have to stay.
Yeah, that's not going to work in the NFL.
Not work in the NFL. But Sages, to your point, you're on the right track here. Brendan's on the right track here because you're looking for players that are ultimately at the centerpiece of what they bring to the table for McDonald. Versatility, flexibility, play multiple positions. These kind of players are going to stand out and be guys that they're going to want to target because it makes his defense more fluid in how it can roll and more, it can be more, he can be more exotic if you can have more guys who can play more roles rather than just have maybe 2 guys in your defense that can play different roles. You have now maybe 3-4 guys in that back end, including linebackers that can do that type of stuff. That's where the game's kind of going. I think you could argue too, Sages, that this is where it's becoming a little bit less positionless and that these kind of players are going to be the new mode that you need to start targeting and locking in on to put your modern defenses together. Because it's less about fitting them to this small little role that you put them in a box and what they do, and more about you're going to do it all.
Yeah, and sometimes it goes a little too far, like when you try to have Boye Mafe in coverage on Deebo Samuel.
Yep, it can be a problematic on that part. Though Julian Love's got to get his butt over to that side of the field quicker too. He's the over the top defender. He's got to stand. But I'll keep an eye on him too, Sages. I checked him out last year. I'll be checking back in on this year, and that's just the kind of guy that certainly is going to catch the glint in McDonald's eye. No doubt about that. But thank you for the $10 donation too, Sages. Feed Me More Seahawks, another $2 donation. He says, I feel like John Schneider only gets excited when he sees left tackles, but that's it. Well, he's never taken a guard, to your point, Feed Me, in the first round. Never taken a guard in the first round. Never taken a center in the first round.
I guess Carpenter ended up playing guard, right?
He did, but they weren't drafting him to be a guard. They were drafting him to be a tackle first and foremost. And I think if they knew he was going to be a guard, I don't know if that would have been the same pick that they made at the time. If it came down to that. So you're kind of right about that, Feed Me. He's certainly not shown a lot of willingness on the other position. I mean, hell, we've only taken in 14 years, Brendan, one second rounder center, right? Posick.
Well, yeah, Posick, and Britt started as a tackle, right?
Britt started as a tackle, right? So can't count him either. So you've got in that period one center you take in the second round, none in the first round. How many guards did we take in the second round?
Let me see here. Let me think here. Well, Sweezy was a 7th rounder, so we're ways off there.
None.
Yeah, Bradford was 4th, right?
Bradford's 4th. Damian Lewis is a 3rd. Haynes a 3rd. We've never taken a second round guard. So, I mean, Feed Me's kind of on it with this that, we're talking a 14-year period here, folks. I'm not talking 5 years of the general manager. I'm not 14 years. That's why I say when this is a 10-year problem with the Max Unger leaving, that's where this has really been the centerpiece of that and their unwillingness to bite and really go and put the quality there. And when you put it all together, no centers, no guards, first or second round, and then you're not going to spend big money, and then you're not going to make trades. Well, it's not so shocking that this offensive line finds itself in such disrepair, is it?
Yeah. I mean, I will say left tackle is the most valuable offensive line position. So at least he's got that in order. But, I've said this, like we've said, especially in recent years, left guard is becoming extremely valuable because there are so few guys that can actually play that position. And it's becoming really important with all these super athletic 3-techs out there. Amen. So if your mindset is we can't spend big on interior offensive linemen because it's not as valuable, like I'll follow you to a certain point on that argument. I think that right guards are pretty dime a dozen, but left guards, we're going the exact opposite way.
That's right. It's absolutely right. Good point, though, Feed Me. Good point. Long live the king. Thank you for the $5 donation. He says, how is it Jackson Smith and Jigba's start as a round 1 pick is going under the radar, underperforming, making business decisions, and DK is being placed under the microscope?
It's probably the contract, if we're being honest, right? DK's on that second contract. He's making good money. JSN is still on the rookie deal. But I do agree with the sentiment that, like, JSN's getting a little bit of a mysterious break here for no reason when over the last year and a half that he's been in the league, his drop rate is actually significantly higher than Metcalf's. I know he doesn't maybe have as many total drops, but that's because he doesn't get targeted as much. Now, I'm not saying that it can't get better. I'm not saying I'm too down on JSN, but his drop rate has been very high over the year and a half he's been in the NFL, which was not what we were billed when we drafted him.
That's right. And to long live the king's point about making business decisions, there's a throw down the sideline in this last game. Watching the All-22 tape last night, I watched it a couple times where, he just sort of lets up on that throw at the end because he thinks the safety's closing over the top to decleat him. That's a business decision there in that moment. Could he make the cut? Could he not? I don't think he gave all the effort he could have. He's had those bad drops. He's not impressed me a ton as a player for a first round pick. I'm not saying he's been bad, but for a first round pick and what he's brought and being a guy that, back to our point earlier on this, Brendan, who has a lot of the attention taken away from him, who's not a centerpiece as a first round pick where they're like, we got to take this guy away first and foremost. It's quite the opposite, giving you a lot of room out there to operate and roll. And, I just don't see him doing a lot to move the needle out there so far. There's still a lot of hope there, but it's not been, super impressive. And you're right, King. There should be a little bit more radar to back to the point on this is that who's a problem, who's part of why we're not contending, why we're not getting to our upside. Is it Geno Smith? No. Is it DK Metcalf? No. Is it a variety of these other things that really do come into play and hold way more sway? Absolutely, yes.
Right. And I mean, JSN, he is getting open consistently. He has been one of the best receivers in the league at getting open. We're getting that, but we need that to start translating a little bit more to justify that pick, because when we made that pick, I remember saying on videos, saying on our streams that we did right after that draft was over, I didn't dislike the pick. I thought the pick was fine, but I did wonder, could you have gotten basically the same thing spending a third or a fourth round pick on the many other slot receivers in that draft? Guys like Marvin Mims, guys like Parker Washington. There were a bunch of guys in that draft who I felt like, yeah, okay, JSN's better, but is he a little bit better or a lot better? So far, I kind of feel like he's been a little bit better.
Yeah, it was a draft for those receivers where it was a deep class, but it wasn't as strong at the top either, right? That's where you had the Quentin Johnson, and JSN, and even Zay Flowers. There were some questions with him on as a player. It wasn't a no-brainer that he was not like this last draft where we had almost four 5-star kind of receiver types coming out, where it was like it was a whole different game. You're anything close to a Justin Jefferson or a Brian, there's the kid down in Jacksonville is lighting up right now.
Brian Thomas.
So you weren't getting anything close to that. So yep, I think it's a fair point. I think it's a very fair point, Long to the King. Thank you, man. Thank you, Board Skyler, for the $5 donation. Says, what's your opinion on our latest draft class? Thank you guys for all your work and consistency. Well, thank you, Skyler. Appreciate that.
Thank you, Skyler. It's way too early to really evaluate that draft class in any meaningful way. I think it's pretty good so far. I'm not down on it. Obviously, we haven't seen enough from Haynes to really judge it, but we haven't seen enough from really anybody. So I don't really know how to answer this.
It is a little early on this one, Skyler, to try to get to too much on this, because, they say with draft classes, you really got to give them 3 years before you can make really an accurate assessment about what the class was or was not being good or bad. I think Byron Murphy's got an injury, but he's shown you from training camp and even in the early part of the year where he was playing that you hit on that pick. Did you knock it out of the park? We'll see with time, but you did hit on the pick. He's going to be a good player in this league. And I think Tyrese Knight has shown himself to be a guy with some upside and something that makes you feel good about where he's at, long-term with that. But again, back to Brendan's point on this, Nehemiah Pritchett, Haynes, Sato Lamea, Jarrell, you don't know what you really have in those guys, either good or bad quite yet at that point. So it's encouraging. It's not been a fail class, that's for sure, but there needs to be just a little bit more time for us to make that full on, holy assessment to it.
Right.
Appreciate you, though. Thank you, Board Scholar. Be calm, see clearly. Thank you for the $5 donation. Bigger trades in the offseason. I say let's see how the season plays out. Go Hawks. By the way, us Buckeye fans will give you Ryan Day for Mike McDonald. I'm not taking that dyed beard, man, that badly dyed beard.
Mm-hmm.
It's every time I see Ryan Day, it just stands out to me, Brendan. It's like, people get those dye jobs where it's like, oh, buddy, just let it go, Just let the gray take over.
Yeah. Can we really judge Ryan Day until you get him a real quarterback? Like, he had CJ Stroud. Results were pretty dang great.
Mm-hmm.
He's got Will Howard these last couple of years, right? Like that's not a real quarterback. Let's get a 5-star in there and see what he can do.
It's hard if you're going to go to one of those programs like that where you take over for a guy that had the program basically humming, and the expectation is that you're taking over a Ferrari and you should be able to just put the pedal down. There's nothing else extra for you to kind of do on that. But, does Ohio State get affected a little bit as much by the NIL stuff? Do they have as much money to go out there and spend as other programs? I don't know on that. I will say that, Brendan, they may not have the quarterback, but that is a team that really got the benefit of returning a lot of guys that in other NFL years, if there wasn't NIL, would have gone into the draft. They had like 5 guys come back to that team, and they should be better than they kind of are, quarterback, play bad or not. But we'll see with Ryan Day. I think the jury's still out him from my perspective. They're calm. I certainly wouldn't trade McDonald for him. That's for sure.
Yeah, I'm pretty happy with the way things worked out.
Bigger trades in the offseason is what he said. What is he saying on that part there, Brendan? Just that he expects them
I think what he's getting at is do not make the trades now. Just wait until the offseason.
Yeah.
Which, to a certain extent, the die is cast.
Yeah. Yeah. Mm-hmm. I think that's a smart way to go there, Big Calm. I think that if you were in a better shape, if you were 5-1 at this point, or you're really starting out, then you could make more an argument to go and make something aggressive. But I think standing pat and letting this just play out is not the worst way to go, and certainly something I'd advocate for too.
Yeah, I wonder if the die is cast is a real quote, or if it just became like apocryphal over time, and people just assumed it was said because it sounds cool.
It is a timeless one, because you get a timeless saying, Brendan, when you've gotten past the point of really not using dies as much, right? That was brought up a lot more time where using a die was commonplace, whereas now we don't even use a die, but it still sets and holds up there. So
yeah, exactly.
It just speaks to how strong it is.
Yeah.
Be calm, see clearly, with another $5 donation. He says, hell, we'll give you Ryan Day if you cover his contract. That is the only reason he's still here at this point.
Yeah. I think there are a lot of Washington fans right now that are hoping that Florida picks up Jed Fish's contract this offseason. Yeah, so we know what's up. We know what's up.
Yeah, it's a weird time in college football right now, man, though, too. Be calm. It's just the game's changing there these last couple of years, and what made a great coach before may not make a great coach in the future, because you have other things that come into factor that never have before in your way to build those programs. And it's just the ground is moving beneath their feet, and some guys are going to be able to adjust with it. Some guys aren't. But it's a major change in the way that it used to roll there with that NIL. It can't be understated. That's why Nick Saban retired,
right?
Because he's like, I don't want any of that. I don't. Chris Peterson saw it coming. That's why he retired. He knew it was coming down the tracks too. I don't want any of that. It's not what I signed up for. Maybe that's a bit of what Ryan's going through a bit with him there. But Ohio State's a great program. Be calm. If it doesn't roll right with him, if he doesn't keep going, contract or not, they'll get the right guy in there. It's too proud of a program, too much of a blue blood for that not to happen.
Yeah, I'm pretty much in tune with that. And I don't know. I still feel like you got to get a real 5-star quarterback in there before you judge Day too much. Like Will Howard transferred in from some small school. He's just a stopgap. I don't know if I would judge anything too much right now.
What about the Ohio State fan? We tell you, though, that he inherited that Ferrari, which should be bringing in those 5-star quarterbacks by the nature of the beast of the program. Why are you failing to recruit those guys?
I mean, it can just be kind of luck of the draw, right? There can be a little bit of that going on as well. You just those guys just don't come available for an offseason or two in a row.
Sometimes it can happen that way. There's not always a glut of great quarterbacks out about there, to your point.
Yeah, like how weird is it that Arch Manning didn't transfer out last offseason when he found out that Quinn Ewers was coming back?
Yeah,
like that could have been the Ohio State quarterback if he had decided to transfer out.
It's true. Very true. Very true. Or if Cam Ward had gone there instead of Miami, how that would have looked differently too for them on that. So
right.
It's a good point. Good point. And be calm. Thank you for the double dip dono on the $5 drop. Phoebe Moore Seahawks, thank you for the $2 donation. Says, don't forget when the general manager for the Chiefs said about DK. I did not see what he said about DK.
Yeah, I'm not familiar with any kind of a quote from the Chiefs GM either, but yeah, I get comments sometimes of like, oh, we should trade Metcalf to the Chiefs, and it's like, why do you want the 32nd overall pick so badly?
Seriously.
Like, it's bad enough that you want to trade him as far as I'm concerned, but and people say trade him to the Chiefs, I just block them. Like, I don't want to listen to anything you have to say, dude. Like,
yeah.
You want to get the 32nd overall pick and then watch him go to the all-pro team 6 times in the next decade and win 4 Super Bowls, because that's what's going to happen. I'm not even exaggerating.
I know. And can you imagine sitting there watching that and the fans that's out there call for this, just the pain that it would be to watch him on a yearly basis going through there with Mahomes on that, where you're just going, you guys, this did not have to be this way. We never had to go down this road. But yeah, there's this like power of spirit out there at times on that, that just, it's not a majority. It's a small contingent that's a very loud contingent in this fan base. Very loud. They're screaming from the top of their lungs almost on a weekly basis at times.
Yeah. And the feelings that you had watching Russell Wilson fall on his face in Denver, it's going to be the exact opposite of that. It's going to be the exact opposite.
That's right. 100%, 150%. So I'm sure that that Chiefs GM would trade for him in a nanosecond if John was put him out there an offer, that they wouldn't have to think twice about it. So to your point on that, feed me. Thank you guys for all the donos. We had 21 donos here on this side of it. I don't think there's much for us. We're definitely an hour and a half in here, so we'll kind of push past. I think we covered everything that there was to cover in the Niner game. We touched upon a bit of the Jamal Adams stuff that's out there. As I don't think you are. I think that's a no-go in any way. So there's nothing to really get into with that. Let's touch upon this trade before we get into the Falcons game here. This trade with Roy Robinson Harris from the Jacksonville Jaguars. I would like to hear and see where you're coming from on it, as far as your take with this trade and this addition.
It's kind of whatever to me, right? Like you give up a 2026 sixth round pick. I'm not going to pretend like I value that pick at all. It's basically nothing. So it's on that level, it's whatever. In a vacuum, it's probably a good trade, right? If you're just talking about the draft pick versus the player, I guess it's probably a good trade. But at the same time, I got to ask myself, like, how is this guy going to get on the field? Because you look at this guy's career, and it's a pretty long career. He's been in the league a while, and he's been on multiple teams with multiple coaching staffs. It's not like you can say, oh, he went to a coach that just misused him. No, he's been on multiple teams. He usually aligns in B gap. He's a B gap player for the most part. And I'm looking at this team right now, and I'm like, okay, you got Leonard Williams, who you just gave $63 million. And by the way, he's playing well. That's your B gap guy. Byron Murphy is also a B gap guy. He's aligning in A gap a decent amount right now just so he can get on the field. But between those two guys, you've got the B gap stuff kind of covered. So I guess this guy is coming in to take snaps away from Mike Morris, but Mike Morris wasn't getting any snaps anyway when Murphy and Leonard Williams were healthy. So first of all, I guess the first thing you take away from this trade is, man, they must think Mike Morris is terrible. They must hate that guy. They must never want him to even sniff the field. And then you're thinking, okay, maybe he's going to be like a 5-tech, like a big edge or something, which I guess he's done a little bit of that. But for the most part, he's not been an edge player in this league. So I don't think you're bringing him in to be like that. So maybe you're thinking about him as like a 4-eye. Maybe you're going to play more 3-4. That's the only thing I can think of. But I don't think McDonald wants to be in 3-4 all the time. I think he wants to have 2 down linemen, and I think he wants to live in that defense as much as possible. So I think it's a decent enough trade, but I don't think it changes anything, because how's he going to get on the field if he's a B gap player?
Yeah, I'm in a little bit of more negative spot than you are on it. Even though it sounds like you're kind of a little bit not super high on it either. This is the second trade that you flipped a sixth round pick for in a month now to deal with an issue that's propped up in the moment. I don't really like my NFL organizations or my team to be reactionary in its moves. And quite frankly, these last 2 moves, the Travis Gibson move, this move feels reactionary. And you threw the Travis Gibson pick away for literally nothing at this point. We know that. He brings nothing to the table. This guy might bring a little bit more to the table. I don't know that he gives you a lot as a run defender. I think he's more of a pass rusher guy and what he really does bring. So it's even there. I think there's some limited upside in what he's really bringing. You talked about the snap count, which I don't think is going to be that much increased on there. So I don't know that you're getting a lot for this. I don't think that he's really bringing much to the table to really help. Is he going to turn around the fortunes of this defense and his presence and not at all, not even close, not even, I think even to a much more than a marginal degree. So I don't really get at the trade from that standpoint. And then when you look at him beyond this year, Brendan, you walked into that trade having $6 million of functional cap space for the 2025 season. Now you have 0 cap space for the 2025 season after this deal, because he's going to make $6 million in base salary. Now, maybe you release him and it's just a 1-year rental and that's what it is. It could very well be that. And I think probably, frankly, that's the way they do go with it. But yeah, it doesn't make it a better deal, though, at the end of the day, where there is no long-term to it. Then you're throwing a 6th-round pick away then for a half a season to play for a guy that gives you marginal impact. I don't think that that's a smart organizational move.
Yeah. I'm just not really going to sweat losing a 6th-round pick in 2026. By the way, it's 2026, not 2025. So it's 18 months down the pipe. I don't really care about that. But again, like, is he taking snaps away from Leonard Williams? I don't think you want to take snaps away from Leonard Williams. You just paid him all that money. And when he's healthy, Leonard Williams is playing really good football right now. Like, you look at a typical game where you're playing about 65 snaps on defense. It should probably be a situation where Leonard Williams is playing 40 snaps in the B gap or 3-tech or whatever you want to call it. and then Byron Murphy's playing like 20, and then you've got maybe 5 snaps left over for somebody else, just throw Mike Morris out there, throw Miles Adams out there. I don't think you needed to make a trade for somebody who maybe he's a tiny bit better than Mike Morris, but how about you make it work with that guy who's already here? How about you make it work with the guy who's already on the team? And if you think that little of him, then why is he still on the team? He should be cut. If you think Mike Morris is so bad that he can't even be the 3rd string 3-tech on this team, then he probably shouldn't be on the team at all.
Agreed. Yeah, agreed. And I'm not mad about the 6th round pick. It's just it's an annoyance thing more than anything else, where it's just you want to see your team making smart moves, and smart moves right on the surface of it. And it's when you're throwing away back-to-back months, late round picks like that for nothing, for a wing and a prayer, basically. I go, that's not what smart organizations do. It's just a little blip. It's not a big deal, but it is one where I go, yeah, but I don't like this. This doesn't seem smart to me. Even on the surface.
And no disrespect to him as a player. He's a decent enough player. It's just, I don't know how he sees the field. I want to be clear about that. That's the main thing I have here.
Yeah, no, fair enough on that. Feed Me More Seahawks clarifies a little bit what he said prior, which he had said, don't forget what the general manager of the Chiefs said about DK, another $2 donation where he says they said that was his biggest draft mistake. Well, thank you for the double dip on the donation. And I think that there's a lot of GMs that were looking at that with us taking DK as the final pick in the 2nd round. I think there's a couple of them that in that draft say that. I think the Eagles general manager would probably say that as well. They took the Stanford, I think, receiver instead of DK on that side of it. And
right.
So a lot of egg on the face of a variety, but that's interesting. And I certainly think that if Kansas City can push their Feed Me, if they could move John off his spot, they'd be one of the lead teams to try to make a run at him, because you can see the fit between a DK and a Patrick Mahomes and how well that would work together.
Right. And, this is a Chiefs team that, obviously they've been good in the draft, but they've made some mistakes. Like, the guy they took instead of DK was Mecole Hardman, to your point. But, you've got Clyde Edwards-Helaire. That's been a complete disaster. You've got Breeland Speaks as a early 2nd round pick. They've made mistakes, but that's probably their biggest one. Yeah, I'm looking at it.
Luckily, he does pretty good on his other drafts, so he's afforded that one when you consider the rest of the work that they've been doing there.
Still waiting for Felix Anudike-Uzomah to break out. He was my guy. I love that guy. I don't know what's going on there.
I liked him too. He's not.
He'll figure it out. He'll figure it out. He'll be fine.
Yeah, give him some time. Though he was supposed to come pretty pro ready with his moves. Be calm, see clearly. Says if it's 2 first rounds, let's talk. For no one?
For one, no.
For one, no.
I think he's talking about Metcalf. And I mean, there's always a price where it's worth it, but nobody's going to offer 2 first-round picks for Metcalf when they then have to extend him immediately. That's the thing, right?
That's the thing. I will say, be calm, see clearly. We were able to pull this deal off back almost, now we're at 20, 25, 30 years or something like that. The Joey Galloway trade, you did get 2 first-round picks for him. The Cowboys did have to then sign Joey Galloway to a contract extension. So in Seahawks history, you've been able to pull this off. But back to Brennan's point, I think if we were to go from about 2010 onwards, I don't believe that there's been, or even let's go from 2005 onwards, I don't think that there's been one receiver who has gone for 2 multiple first-round picks in a trade.
Right. Roy Williams was a 1st and a 3rd.
Tyreek's like 1st and a 3rd.
Yeah.
Stefan Diggs is a 1st that they got from the Vikings to the Bills. You're kind of in that mode where you're going to be like 1st, 3rd is the top of that it'll go. That's as far as teams will drive.
Yeah. And I mean, the Joey Galloway thing, that was a terrible trade from the Cowboys perspective. And that speaks to, Jerry Jones being stupid and not knowing how to be a GM. And, we learned that again this week, right? He trades a 1st-round pick for Amari Cooper. A few years later, trades Amari Cooper for a 5th-round pick. A couple years later, the Browns trade him to the Bills for a 3rd-round pick. Amari Cooper did nothing but get older. He had bad years producing in Cleveland. He did not produce. And they're able to get a 3rd-round pick for him. He had his best years in Dallas, and they got a 5th-rounder for him when he's younger. Like, he just sucks at his job. You can't use that as an example of like, oh, this happened, so therefore this can happen over and over again. No.
Yeah, we definitely took advantage of that Galloway trade of him. Be calm, and you'd love that if you can do that with Jerry, but I think they don't do those kind of moves anymore, even like they once did. But that was the only reason you're able to pull that one off at the time. And I think even in the 90s, you don't have other than that Galloway trade, I don't think that there's a receiver that goes for 2 1s in the 90s either. So it's just, it's very hard to get that compensation back. It really is. But like Brendan said, I mean, there's always a price. There's always a price we'll take if somebody's going to go exorbitant, but it'd be hard to anticipate that one.
Right.
Board Skyler, thank you for another $5 donation. Double dip from you as well today on the stream. Says, do you think we have a leadership issue with all these one-year players? Personally, I'm not a fan of the whole new captains every week. Seems soft.
Yeah, I could go one way or the other on the new captains every week thing, but I don't know if that is emblematic of a lack of leadership on this team. There probably isn't a lot of leadership on this team right now just because so much stuff is new. But, I think you've got Witherspoon. I think he's a leader. I think to a certain extent you could say like a Jaron Reed's a leader. I think Geno Smith is stepping into the leadership role, not smoothly necessarily at all times, but overall, I feel like he's doing a pretty good job in there. So I think that there was always going to be a little bit of a leadership turnover with the new coaching staff coming in, and it's not where it needs to be yet, but you wouldn't expect it to be.
I think I'm pretty much of like-minded Brennan on this one, Board Skyler. I think that this is the bit of the nature of what you'd expect, as he said, with the new coaching staff coming in with such a young team. I mean, we're I think like third youngest team in the NFL. We're in that area of things. So when you do have a young team, getting that leadership to rise up is going to be a little bit harder. It is going to be the key with this team as we go into the future. It's the key to this team if they want to reach to contending status, is those leaders emerging in that locker room and taking on that ultimate responsibility of the team, not just in there doing their job. And quite frankly, at times I see a little bit of, especially when it comes to the defensive side of the ball, as I've said before, a little bit of guys just coming in there and doing their job. I'm working their 8 to 5. I'm going in there and I'll give you the bare minimum of what you need for me to do my job, versus guys out there flying around, complete buy-in of spirit. And I think you get some of that when you have the leaders that are holding the feet to the fire of those fellow players, their fellow guys around them. And I don't know that that's exactly happening this year. I think Brendan's right. There are leaders on this team, but is it to the degree it needs to be in order for you to turn into a great team? I don't think so. Not quite yet. Not quite yet. But it is early and they are young, and it's understandable why that is the case then there, Skyler. I'm not a fan either. I like Brendan. I don't have a hard opinion on this, but I like better having the captains at the start of the year. You want to get those leadership positions, in my opinion, kind of ingrained so that those guys have a stronger voice on a week-by-week basis to be able to call guys out if they have to call them out. Whereas if I'm the captain this week, can I call the guy out next week when I'm not the captain? How does that work? Right.
It is an interesting one.
Yeah, I had never heard of it really being run like that before either, Brendan. It's definitely a new one to me on this weekly captain thing, but I'm not a fan of it either. Thank you though, Skyler. Great point on your part. Leadership will be the big part, the big, huge, turn of the screw next that needs to come into play for this team. I really do believe that is we're going to hope to get to that next step. Well, let's pivot here on as we're almost 2 hours in here to the actual preview in the game here, Brendan, and take a look at this Falcons matchup coming on in. We got a first place Falcons team. We got to go on the road, 10 a.m. game. Kirk Cousins, who's had some success against your Seahawks recently, and now it's new defense, theoretically, that he gets to play. Big picture item coming in on this game right out the gate. In general terms, what needs in this game to happen for your Seahawks to come away with a win?
Well, we don't totally know who we're going to have yet. Murphy has said that he is going to play. He said that a little earlier today. So we got that. But we need to find out what's going on with Woolen. We need to find out what's going on with Trey Brown. We're going to find out some information later today. So that's going to be a big part of it. But I would say that you got to kind of anticipate a shootout. Those games in Atlanta's dome usually turn into shootouts anyway. It's like a track meet sometimes. You just get on that Atlanta turf, and it's off to the races. Back in the day with Matt Ryan and Julio Jones, it would happen all the time. I think in a game like this, you got to expect it. So offensively, it's like a more extreme version of what we were talking about last week. We were talking about the deficiencies with the Niners defense last week, but this Atlanta defense is just really, really bad. They have no pass rush. They have 5 sacks in 6 games. Their run defense is completely worthless. They don't have any beef in the middle. They don't have any ability to stop the run. They are one of the worst. I think they're actually the worst team in the league at covering running backs out of the backfield. There are so many issues with this Atlanta defense that you should be able to exploit in climate-controlled situations like this game will be. I think that I think that the main focus needs to be the defense is going to give up stuff. Of course they are, but our offense has to get theirs.
I agree. I think you're going to have to win this as a shootout as well. And that I think 51 is the over in this game. I think you can slam that over. I think you're going to get a lot of points scored. And you have two teams too, Brendan, that are really bad at stopping the run, which is where both offenses are probably going to have a little bit of their way either side on these defenses. So, can our defense be strong in the red zone? Can our defense find some turnovers where they have not? And then offensively, can we keep up with the Falcons team? And then can we not shoot ourselves in the foot like we have once or twice a game, almost on a weekly basis offensively, no matter what good we have? I look at it and go, those will be kind of some of the keys to me on that too as well. And that, the score and the points are going to be there. You're not going to hold them down too much there, but can you do those other things? And if you can keep them to field goals, you can keep them out of the end zone and you can do those. I know the offense can move against this Falcons team. I just don't know if they can avoid the costly, untimely, turnover, horrible mistake in the moment, bad penalty when you're just starting to get a drive going from the offensive line, this type of stuff. They just always kind of find that way to offensively, even when things are going good, to do something that just completely upends things.
Right. And against this defense, you should be a little better equipped to bounce back from a situation like that. You can get into 1st and 15 or 1st and 20. It's not the end of the world like it is against some teams because they have no ability to rush the passer. Like I said, 5 sacks in 6 games. I see 5 sacks from one team in one game all the time. Mm-hmm. It's not even that big of a deal.
Yeah.
So you should be a little bit better equipped to handle it. But I would say that is my focus because I don't think you're shutting down that Atlanta offense, even if we get all these guys back. And I do have some degree of optimism that Woolen's going to be able to play for whatever that's worth. Trey Brown, not so much. We know Artie Burns is out. We know Rayshon's out. And I know people are hating on Rayshon right now, but realistically, I mean, he was playing badly because he was injured. So he's not a bad player. He's just going through a tough time right now. So I'm really just thinking about how we can take advantage of that stuff on that side. Now, we are due some turnovers. They always do say they come in bunches and they come unpredictably. Be a nice week to get that going. But I do imagine that you're going to see a 400 plus yards from that Atlanta offense at minimum, and they're going to throw up their points. But I also expect there to be a degree of desperation from this team because you kind of have to win this game. We have lost 3 NFC games already this year. If we start 0-4 in the NFC, I don't know how you bounce back from that. Like that's going to kill you in tiebreakers down the line. Especially because some of these games you're losing are to teams that may end up competing for a wild card spot. And Atlanta's not really in that spot, right? Their division has quieted way down. After tonight, it's probably going to be the Saints are going to be out of it. The Buccaneers have cooled off a little bit. They're still good, but they are not feeling the anxiety the way the Seahawks should be. So there should be a little bit of that going on that pushes the Seahawks up a little bit in terms of the effort they should give, especially with the mini bye week. That I think is going to allow them to at least be the better version of themselves.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. Can't understate enough that sense of sometimes desperation that'll come into play on that. And as you played so bad the past 3 games, and having that extra rest, having those extra days of rest to maybe get the bodies back to a little bit fresher state, maybe that also kind of factors in here. I think there's something to be said too for controlling the ball in this game a bit. If you're able to move on them and you're able to run the ball on them and able to run the ball on them early, which has been something you've not been able to do in almost any game this year so far, a way to maybe take some of the stress of that defense off, able to just kind of hold on to that ball throughout the day, keep Cousins off the field, keep them out of rhythm. It's an easier said than done thing because we just did not run the ball well early in the games. But back to your point, this is not a defense that's been, by and large, really stout in stopping that run at all. And so you should be finding some holes there. There should be some ways for us to work our way down the field using that aspect of the game where it seems like so many of these games, Brendan, we have to wait till like the 3rd quarter before we can finally start to run the ball with any kind of effectiveness.
Right. And I don't know if I want to test them deep because the one part of that Atlanta defense that I think works is that safety tandem. They got a real nice one, Jesse Bates and Justin Simmons. Justin Simmons has been stuck on a terrible team basically his whole career. If he wasn't, he'd probably be in Hall of Fame discussions. Really, really good player. One of the best safeties of his generation. And Jesse Bates is, I mean, he was one of the big reasons why that Bengals team made the Super Bowl a few years ago. So I'm not looking to test that too much. But everything else on this defense, I'm kind of ready to go at it because I don't believe they fixed very much from the defense we've seen early this year. And really, 2 of their wins this year have been very fluky, if you really break it down.
Terrell's pretty good for them too. Their outside corner they've got on the outside. He's a good zone off coverage corner in the league. Don't think he gets over talked about sometimes where he gets people push him up a little too high, but I don't think he's there. Justin Simmons is dealing with a hamstring injury coming in this game. Did not practice on Wednesday. So we'll see if he does, play, as those hamstring injuries can be a bit tough. Got to give John some props on this as well, as the Seahawks be on the right end of this one. Is Arnold Ebiketie, that Penn State kid off the edge here a couple years ago, has not developed for them. That was a guy the Hawks were looking at possibly targeting. They got snaked a little bit by Falcons in the draft. Went with Mafia instead, but we came out the other end of that one quite nicely.
Yeah, that was a very good one. And I guess Judon's not done much for them yet, right?
No, I think he's got like a sack and a half. But that is an aging player, and you knew that was one of those situations there with the Patriots where there was a reason they were moving off of a guy like that there. Maybe a lack of buy-in, maybe he's getting that spot in his career. I think I'm starting to get this place where I see these veterans start to make this move, these edges, Brendan, these rushers where they start making the business decision of, I'm going to be a pass rusher first, and then I'm not really going to do as much run defending. I'll sacrifice some run defense to get a little bit more after the quarterback. And guys start making this they start doing this math, what it seems like right around they get around 30 years of age, where they start making this transition into this type of player. And you got to be careful of that with those kind of guys, because they can be kind of fool's gold where you're thinking you're getting this, but you're really getting more target on the player they used to be rather than what they are right now.
Right. So they still have Grady Jarrett, right? He's still kicking around over there.
Sack and a half. He's still playing pretty decently, though. Again, he is definitely getting up there. That guy's played quite a lot of football.
Yeah. That's just it feels like a bad recipe for your defense. There's just not enough going on there. Troy Anderson, the linebacker, he was a guy I remember being really interested in the draft. I guess he's been pretty good, but he's not really making the unit play all that much better. And he's injured too, by the way. We don't know if we're getting him.
Yeah, he's got a knee, and he didn't practice on Wednesday either. So he has been a pretty good player for them, to your point on that. But it's been a defense that has some individual guys that are interesting, but has it all come together for them? I mean, it's kind of like us a little bit like that, where it's like, well, you got some parts, but has it quite come together like you had kind of hoped it would come together? And, maybe not quite yet. I'm sure there's some Falcon fans that are going, well, look at how good Cousins is playing. We should have gone with a, Byron Murphy instead or something like that on that front. And that would have made our defense better. I still maintain I like the Penix pick for them. If Cousins goes down this year, they're in first place. It's going to look even better if they're in first place and Penix takes over, where it's like, wow, they had some foresight on that one. But do you still stand there on that, or do you think in retrospect they should have pivoted off of Penix there?
I still think that pick is a disaster. I mean, especially with Dallas, you had Dallas Turner there, you had Byron Murphy there. These things would be helping you win right now. And say whatever you want to say about Cousins being a risk, but the way he's playing right now, there's a scenario where he's the Atlanta starter for the next 2 seasons after this one. And then Penix never sees the field, and you're in that, Jordan Love, Aaron Rodgers scenario, which, okay, if it turns out the way Aaron Rodgers and Jordan Love has, ultimately, great. But in the meantime, you have a team that might be able to win now that won't be able to win now because their defense is terrible.
It's very true.
I don't like it.
And that's where I just come back to, I don't think that one extra defensive player would have made that difference. I don't think a Dallas Turner coming in there or a Byron Murphy even coming in there will help those defenses out. They'd still be a defense that's poor. It's still a defense giving up its share of points and yards because there's a long way for it to go. And we'll see on the Cousins. I mean, part of the Penix pick being smart is that it happens. It's going to look smart the second Cousins goes down. If you're, if you're 9-6 and he goes down at that point, you're 8-5 and he goes down, and you can put Penix out there for a run for you into the playoffs. Well, you look brilliant at that point. You look stupid if Cousins able to maintain that health for 3 years, to your point on it. So it really is like there is no kind of middle ground on that pick of it being good or bad. It's either going to be looking horrible or look super smart. But I think that Aging quarterback like that, where just one hit can knock him out. I don't want my whole season to come up to that, where we lose a 36-year-old Cousins and now our whole season's sunk because we don't, have a viable backup behind him to do anything. But I get where you're coming from, and certainly where you're at on that is where I think by and large the majority of people were on that stance of it and their outlook of it.
Right.
Bijan Robinson was a guy that was looked at when he was taken out in the draft, Brendan, and we both loved him quite a bit. It's been a bit underwhelming watching him run the ball there with the Falcons and see him not able to quite tap into that sort of special status that you thought you were getting with him. What do you think's holding him up? Is he just not that good? Did we just overrate this guy?
I don't know. It's really confusing, though. It doesn't make a lot of sense to me. He's got some pretty good blocking. I mean, that Atlanta offensive line is pretty good. They were struggling a little bit early in the season, but I think that was because of the opponents they were playing as much as anything. I'm confused by that one too. My gut still tells me he's uber talented, and my gut still tells me he could be a top 3 running back in the league, but I also can't really justify the way he's looked so far this season. I think that I can't really blame it on any other thing other than maybe he's young, I guess. I know he came in the league when he was 21 years old, but he looked more dynamic than this in college.
He really did. And maybe it's just need to give him some more time for it to click in. They do have a good 2-1-2 back attack there with Tyler Algiers, who's a very good functional, strong back. They give you that a little bit thunder and lightning. I will say the one thing that stands out to them in doing the research on them, this is a team that lives, I mean, absolutely lives in outside zone. Pitch plays to the outside. They are not like what we had a little bit with the Lions team, or what we even would get times with the 49er team with Mason, where they were going to hammer you, just live on that A and those B gap runs, where we probably have struggled at our most, Brendan, this year is run defense in those A and those B gap runs. This team just loves getting to the edges, though. And that's maybe one spot that you have been a little bit better at defending. It doesn't feel like we've had as many pitches to the edge that have broken big, though. I guess that Garendo run was an outside zone run, and maybe there was one or two as I think about it now.
Yeah. I mean, nothing about the run defense right now is all that good, I would say. But I think I'd rather deal with that in general. Although with Murphy coming back, maybe not. Maybe you can go, Leonard Williams and Big Cat in the middle, and suddenly those holes in the middle are going to be not nearly as prevalent. But
well, give me that. Let's give me that as a way you'd go with this, because right now we know defensively through these first 6 weeks, this team doesn't defensively take anything. It doesn't seem like they lean to try to take, they're just playing it straight up rather than we'll take this part of your game away from you. Is that a fair way to assess how it's gone?
More or less. Yeah. There have been a couple moments where I felt like we leaned in more to the 3-man fronts than the 2-man fronts, but
yeah,
for the most part, yeah.
So this week, do you try to take away the passing attack and give up what you give up on the ground? Or do you just try to maintain that same balance and see if this can finally click into where you can relock things in?
No, I'm trying to take away that passing attack that Atlanta is going to lean on pretty heavily, I'm sure, because one thing about Atlanta's offense is they've got 4 legitimate receivers that they feel very comfortable throwing the ball to. London, Moody, Pitts, and who's the other guy who's been productive for them?
London, Moody, Pitts, and Ray?
Yeah, Ray McLeod's actually been really good so far this year. Okay. There we go. Yeah. So, they're going to try to spread the ball around. They're going to be a high-flying aerial attack. Maybe that's part of the reason why Bijan's having a little bit of trouble. They're not featuring him as much as he's used to, so he can't really get going. Maybe that's a problem.
Yeah, I can make a lot of sense. Backs need that
yeah. With Murphy back, and I know that you said that you weren't a big fan of putting Murphy in the A gap the way that we were doing, having him play like nose tackle. But I do think that with the struggles this defense has had, you got to go back to the 2-man fronts with Big Cat and Murphy as much as possible. Hope they can hold their own in the middle and get that extra guy on defense in the back 7 and try to have success that way. So yeah, I am focused on stopping the pass.
It's probably a pretty smart way to go, especially considering you're not going to have Rayshon Jenkins. So you want to maybe lean a little bit more help to your safety position, give more of the zone coverage, more of him having to not cover as much space. That backup you're having trotting out there, be it Kobe Bryant or whoever they may run with Kayvon Wallace in that role. So it would make sense that you go a bit to this side of it as well. I'd like to see Tariq Woolen continue to try, if he is playing, to travel with Drake London. I think that's a very good matchup for him, where you have a bigger receiver in Drake London that wants to win really with contested catches as much as with separation. And so with a longer, taller guy like Tariq Woolen matched up on that guy, that's an advantageous matchup, I think, for Tariq too.
Yeah. I'll take Woolen against pretty much anybody in the league right now, though. The way he's playing, very locked in. Even his tackling has gotten better, I feel like. But yeah, I'll take Woolen against anybody. I just hope he plays. I haven't seen any confirmation one way or the other yet.
Yeah, I haven't either. It still is a little bit on the line, but if he does, then I definitely would go with that route. But if he doesn't, back to your point again, you need to get that protection on that secondary. Give those guys, 7 guys dropping in zone, squeeze those zones and try to lean that way as much as you can this game. You're not going to stop the Falcon offense, but you just hope you can slow them down, keep them out of the end zone, limit down their red zone efficiency, and you're going to put your share of points up on the other side of it. You can win the game doing it that way, I believe.
Yeah. And, Cousins is going to give you some opportunities at interceptions. That's what he does. So
he will throw it up a little bit of time, especially if you can get him into a high volume point. He'll give you a couple opportunities. So you got to make the most of him if he does do that. And hopefully we can cause some pressure and get him uncomfortable, because he's a guy that doesn't move. I mean, one thing that does stand out, Brendan, to me is that he's working around it, and he's working around it amazingly. But watching his games this year, there's times where that back foot that he Achilles'd out, that thing's raising, like, he's got that thing lifting like almost like way off the ground when he's throwing, like in the act of throwing, where, normally they're spinning that toe down on the back. So when they turn, you get kind of the toe turn on the back foot when a quarterback's throwing. His foot, if you look at it, watch this week, that back foot's completely off the ground as he's throwing. It's like he's kind of, it's almost like favoring protecting it, like, I don't want to, it sort of spins and hurts to twist. So rather than twist, I'll just use my upper body and all my torque here and then just leave that off the ground. But he's making it work, man.
It's not supposed to work. I'll say that.
It doesn't look like it should work. I'll tell you that when you watch him play there, because you can definitely tell he's still kind of favoring that back ankle. It's not at 100%. He doesn't have the mobility back there. So if you can draw some pressure, we have had some guys this year at times that can, get a little bit away from pressure at time. Your Knicks in the game. Even Brissett's so hard to bring down. He can sometimes do that last little throwaway thing as you're bringing him to the ground. With Cousins, you can take him down pretty easily if you can get the pressure on him. So easier said than done. He gets the ball out of his hands really fast. He's a smart quarterback. He can see blitzes coming from a mile away, but you've got to get some pressure on him, and you got to make him move. Dune Moose, thank you for the $5 donation, Dune. Brando, there are a few guys I like listening to, but you're the best because you engage your viewers the most. Thanks. Well, very kind of you to say. I know Brendan does a lot of the same stuff on his side, and I know we both like and really enjoy it. It's part of some of the most of what I get to do and enjoy on this channel, Dune, is the interactions I get to have with the chat. Me and Brendan at times in this show have talked a little bit about the people that get us, unnerved a little bit on some of the discussions that happen that are silly and fruitless and not very intelligent when it comes to certain players and things about this team. But by and large, we get the opportunity to really engage with people that are very smart fans and are on it. That they're not just casually watching this team. They're in the depths in the same way that me and Brendan are. And from our perspective on it, it's just really worth a lot for us to have interactions with people on that same level, because it better educates us. It's also, we love this sport. We love this game. And so to talk about this type of stuff and be able to get to the depths of it with other people that are in that same place, that puts us kind of in hog heaven. That's where we're a pig in slop at that point, that this is an ideal for us. So I love doing it. It ain't hard to do when there's so many people every single time I get to go live that are on that level, that bring that cool spirit, that just want to engage and talk football. And we may disagree or we may agree, and that doesn't matter. At the end of the day, we're all operating from that same spirit, I think. And how can you not love to do that? I say.
Yeah. I mean, thank you, Dune. I appreciate that.
Yeah. Very, very kind of you, man. Very kind of you. And you guys are amazing on the support as always on the donations, guys. Thank you so much. Really do appreciate all of you guys for all your support with me and Brendan. If you haven't as well, do this, please do sub up. If you're either here on the Hawks Nest or you're over on Seahawks Brendan Nelson, please sub up on both sides. We do this as a weekly show here. We'll get some special shows in here eventually as the season plays out. We're still just trying to kind of let the tail of the year play out before we do those special shows that we lock in on stuff that's really big picture items for the team in general. But really appreciate that, Dune. That's really kind of you to say. And I love my interactions with our fan base. It's every time I get to go live, it's always something that never disappoints from my perspective of things. So in general terms, and looking at these matchups in this game, Brendan, We're expecting a high scoring game. You want to try to take away a little bit of the pass, want to find some balance offensively. Certainly would love to see the running game work a little bit early on in this one. Do you see it as a shootout here? You see this as being a game where, 30-27-ish or 30, something in that level is what's going to probably win this game out?
I don't see how it's not. It would be really weird if it wasn't a shootout. If it's not a shootout, it's probably because the Seahawks got blown out. So I really don't want to see that.
Yeah.
Because Atlanta at home is going to put up points. Maybe they won't play great. Maybe they'll have turnovers, but they're going to score. They're going to move the ball. They're a little too good to do anything else. So if it's not a shootout, that's probably really bad. So I'm going to say yes.
So and then would you say this is probably pretty accurate to say this is not going to be the week that we're going to see the stack boxes, simulated pressures, that we should just anticipate in advance that it's probably more of the 4-man fronts and 7-man in coverage and zone coverage at that's by and large where we're going to be living in this game?
We did have some extra time this week. I will say that, right? Like we did have the mini bye week. It's a little bit different when you're going into a game and you only had, 6 days or 4 days. But at the same time, you did lose Rayshon. And I think part of the problem is a lot of these players, when we get a lot of backups out there, I think McDonald feels less comfortable doing exotic stuff.
I think that's a fair point. Because hell, when you've had the starters out there, you haven't exactly been around a lot of exotic stuff. So, you think it would only go further in that direction if you're talking about the backups being out there. So, I'm just kind of preparing myself spiritually for that advance, Brendan, so I don't bitch and moan about it on Sunday where I go, I knew this was going to probably be, so I'm not going to let this one, I'm not going to freak out about this one. We know is where it was going to be at. And it's understandable at some point, maybe we'll see some of the flourishes we thought we might expect coming into this year, from the defensive side of the ball. Well, give me a score on this one, man. How does this game, it plays out as a shootout to your eyes. But how do you see this one really at the end of the day settling out when it's all said and done?
Well, again, we need to see who's going to play in this game. I think Woolen being in or out is massive. I think that could swing the game single-handedly, really.
Good. Yeah, especially because I think he's got a good chance of, if he's matched up on London, I think that's an advantageous matchup for Woolen. I like London. He's come on as a player. He's a good player, Brendan, but I think that's in his favor, wouldn't you say, to Woolen in that matchup?
So I get the sense he's going to play. I'm going to go with 33-30 Seahawks. I'm feeling a lot of points, a lot of production, and I think we need it more. And I think that's going to come into play here. They're not desperate. If anything, they're probably feeling really good about themselves, better than they should, because they pulled 2 wins out of their butt already this season. That they were dead to rights against Philly and Tampa. Found really weird ways to win both of those games. If anything, they're probably on cloud 9 because they're like, wow, we should be a 2-win team.
I think that's a fair point there. Yeah.
So I'm going to say 33-30 Seahawks.
And I will go a little bit opposite here. I'm in a place where I need this team to prove it to me a little bit, Brendan, from what I've seen from an effort level the past 3 weeks, from a coaching and putting players in a position to succeed versus not succeed position the past couple of weeks. I really want to see some proof of it on the field from the team before I get back around to the line of against a team that's a quality team, thinking they're going to beat that quality team. I need you to sort of show it to me before I'm in on believing it at this point, because it has been such bad performances the past 3 weeks, 3 games, 11 days. I don't want to undersell that. They've got the rest. They should be better. But I need to see it at this point. I need not to be told that it's going to be. I need to see it. I need to see, how the coaches are going to help the players. And like we're talking about with the 4-man fronts and soft zone defenses, and you may have to run that. It may be by necessity that you have to run that, but that also doesn't then mean that your coaches are necessarily doing a lot stylistically to get exotic to help out those players that are backups. You're now then aligning those backups out there and saying, okay, hold up in coverage against this A1 starter you're going to go against as a backup. And that's probably going to be a fail, So in anticipation of a little bit of that strategy to this game, Brendan, that's where I come to a 30-27 kind of finish on this, where I do like you think it's a shootout, but I also think that this team is not quite able to do enough stuff right now to really take full well advantage of the talent that they have.
Yeah. I mean, we're not that far off of each other, right? We're in the same area. I mean, we both have Atlanta scoring 30 points, so we're both right there.
There we go.
And I also will say this. I feel like this is a must win if this team wants to make the playoffs.
I agree with you on that. I think you're getting to that spot of things. 3 straight losses in a row and you're dropping where you're dropping. Anything's possible in this division, Brendan, in the respect of you could be out of the playoffs, but if you can get hot week 8 onwards in this division, you get a home playoff game, you can win the division because the division is kind of wide open, right? I mean, 3-3 is, so that part does still factor in, but you know, it's going to be a hell of an uphill battle if you come out of this one. And your point about the NFC and being 0-4 in the NFC at that point and the tiebreakers that could be at play. I mean, I think you're definitely, here's this, Brendan. You lose this game, you're definitely out on wild card. You lose this game, the only pathway to probably getting into the playoffs then at that point is by going out and winning the division. Pretty much,
yeah. And you're going to need other teams to knock out the Niners for you because you've already shown you're not going to be the team that knocks them out. It'll need to be kind of like, remember 2004? We lost to the Rams 3 times that year, but we still won the division because the Rams couldn't beat other teams. Like it would need to be something like that again.
100%. Say nothing if you mention the Rams team. That very well might need to be the case for the Rams team too, because their schedule is going to set up very well for them to go on a run this year. And if they get their players back, they get their receivers back like they're probably going to be getting, no easy peasy there. So it's much better to keep the wild card path open here rather than the narrow gates of trying to get through the division with what we have ahead of us here. So get this win, Seattle, this week. Find a way to make it happen. Show a sense of urgency. Coaching staff, take some risks in this game. You know, if it's going to go sideways, if you're going to give 24 points in the first half in this game, we'll come back and start trying to take some risks then. And don't just line them up and play it out and let it just, you know, slow roll you to kind of death like we have at times in some of these games. Would like to see that as well if it goes that way as a trend early in the game, Brendan.
Yeah. I mean, not that I'm expecting it, but I would certainly like it. It would certainly make me happy to see.
It would. We need some encouragement here, Seahawks fans. It's been a brutal last 3 weeks run for what you've had to watch football wise. And let's face it, it's been the past couple of years. You've seen some of this kind of bad brand of football, piss poor pass protection, unable to run the ball, a defense that can't stop anything, run or pass or get turnovers or rush the quarterback. We've seen too much of this in recent years. We're ready to see this start to turn around back in the other direction here. Let's hope they can do it this week, Brendan, to get the reinforcements back in the ranks. Hopefully that's enough to kind of propel this a little bit more forward for this week. So we'll see how it plays out, man, but very hopeful for the Hawks. And I do expect no matter what, you're going to get a close game and a well-fought game here from your Seattle Seahawks when it's all said and done.
Yeah, if nothing else, let's get something so the DK complainers and the Geno complainers don't have anything to say for a week. That'd be nice, right?
At the very least, it'd be good to get a break of those 2 topics. Yes, I'd like to be able to just concentrate on some other things than those items that have become a point of obsession at times for the fan base.
Yeah, let us lose because Stone Forsythe gave up 23 pressures in a game. Let us lose because of that.
Yeah, well, they still probably find a way to blame Geno on that one somehow. You know, well, he could have called an audible there, you know, and not put it like, okay, you know, all right. Well, thank you as always for doing this, Brendan. I really appreciate you guys. I want to say thank you to all of the donators. We had people put multiple donations in. If you put one in, and you guys are very kind for all of the support that you put to both of our channels. You're what allows us to do what we do here on a middle of the week, middle of the day show. We can do that because you guys put this kind of support in on the chat. If you can, do me the favor and hit that like button on both sides. If you're on the Seahawks, Brendan Nelson, watch it from his channel, hit the like button here. If you're watching from my channel, hit the like button here. And of course, sub up to both channels as we both really would appreciate it. It is absolutely positively free. We will be back along here on Thursday for, of course, the next BNB show on the preview game with that. So we will be back fairly soon, see if our Hawks can get the W. I really appreciate you guys watching today. Again, thank you for all the donations in the chat. We had 24 donations today in the chat, which is just amazing support. You guys are awesome on that side of it. Thank you, Brendan, for doing this. Let's get this dub, man. Let's get this thing turned back around. Let's stop the let's get the water pumps underneath in the cargo hold, get the water out, right? Get this ship back, get the lilt out the ship, right? Get back on the open waters. We're still in the early part of the season, man. Anything is still in our grip. Anything is still possible. The story of the Seattle Seahawks 2024 season has not been set yet, has it not? I mean,
it's your job as a coach to right the ship when the ship goes wrong. Pete Carroll, for all of his flaws, was very good at it until I'd say last season. When things started going badly, he had a way of getting the team back on their feet. And look, I mean, I'm not happy with the way the team has played the last few weeks, but I'm excited to see how McDonald handles adversity. This is the first time he's faced any adversity as a head coach, because in the offseason, I think 95% of the fan base was just so thrilled to have him. And then you start 3-0 and everything's going good. Now he's got something to bounce back from. I want to see how he bounces back from it.
It's a great point. It's a great point. And to your point on that with his coaching career, it's been a bit of a, kismet for him as far as, take over from Wink Martindale. Everything works good. Get down to Michigan, get that defense right, come back to Baltimore, defensive coordinator. It works, it's all kind of worked really well for him so far. So that adversity point, we're going to learn a little bit more about this coach at this point. That's a great point on your part. And we'll just have to see how he can roll, see what adjustments he might have, what tricks he might have up his sleeve on this one, Brendan. Well, thank you for doing this, folks. We will be back here in about 3-4 days, hopefully able to report back on a win for your Seahawks. But until that time, even after a 3-game skid, I hope you guys aren't losing faith. I hope you guys are still keeping your eye on that ball because everything is still attainable this season. We ain't done yet. There's still way too much talent on this football team for them to believe that this is our final form, our final state. It should get better on both sides of the ball as this year goes along, as you hopefully get healthier, as the team starts to understand both concepts and principles on both sides of the ball a little bit better. But we'll just have to see how it plays out. So back soon. But until that time, Seahawks fans, please don't you ever forget, go Hawks.
Go Hawks.